A guy gets transmigrated into his favorite superhero Manhua and decides the best way to protect the heroine he loves is to become her villain. That's the setup. Kim wakes up in the world of Stardust, a manhwa he knows so well he's basically got it memorized, and his first move is not to be a hero. He puts on a mask, names himself Ego, and starts quietly eliminating the villains who are going to become serious threats down the line. Rhino, a Class A villain who was eventually going to massacre hundreds of people, gets taken out in his apartment before any of that happens. Ego grabs the building blueprints Rhino was holding, confirms the guy was already planning another attack, and leaves his signature on the window in blood. Casual. His assistant Seo handles the logistics. She wants ice cream on the way back. He hangs up on her. The problem is that killing villains is making him look good, and a villain who looks good is not useful to him. When the news breaks that Ego took down both Rhino and Zodiac, Stardust's image as the one keeping the city safe starts to look shaky by comparison. Kim is spiraling about this. SEO walks in, says Stardust, and he confirms that's exactly the issue. So he decides it's time for an official debut, something that makes his villain status absolutely undeniable. He plants bombs in 2 skyscrapers, hijacks every screen in the city, and introduces himself live. Elevators locked, countdown running, people panicking. Then he looks into the camera and says something like, "If there's a villain, there has to be a heroine, right?" and calls out Stardust by name to come stop him. She's there in seconds. And this is the moment the whole chapter has been building toward. Ego sees her land in front of him, and he genuinely cannot process that she's real. We get a flashback. Kim, freshly transmigrated, lost and in pain, stumbling through chaos in an unfamiliar city. And then he turns a corner and sees a hologram of Stardust. He goes completely red, eyes wide. She was his favorite character before any of this, and now she's standing right in front of him. Back in the present, he thinks through it clearly. If he were a hero, he could be near her. But he's read this story enough times to know that's not enough. A hero at her side still can't protect her from what's coming. The only path that actually works in his head is this one. So he smiles, holds up the detonator, and tells her to stay back. Stardust is furious. Ego is looking at her like she's the whole reason he's here, because she is. And then the chapter cuts back to when Kim was only 15 years old. He was watching a superhero movie, and for some reason, the villain would not stop laughing. Kim called that villain a psychopath and said his character was way too forced. It cut to Ego laughing uncontrollably. Stardust was furious, but the two remained standing face to face. Meanwhile, citizens appeared desperately on the screen. Stardust was pressing her fist. Ego warned that his subordinate also had control of the bomb, so she had better not try to stop him. Right after, she gave up on advancing. Ego spread his arms and asked the audience what they thought of the stage he had created for Miss Stardust. She ignored what he said and demanded he release the innocent people immediately. Kim then turned to the cameras and announced he would release the elevators of each building, as the hero had requested. Then, he snapped his fingers, and the elevators were reactivated. Stardust could not believe this could end so easily. One of the citizens ran toward the elevator, until Ego screamed for them to wait. He said it would not be any fun if they just left like that, and that in fact, the down button on the elevator would activate the bomb in the other building. Everyone was scared. Stardust closed her expression. Ego raised his fingers and announced the bomb would go off in 30 minutes, and told them to press it and get out before then. He laughed, saying after all they were just strangers. The two were still face to face. Stardust ground her teeth, calling him a bastard. Ego cut in, saying that today they would witness the pinnacle of human selfishness. The citizens in the building started arguing among themselves, some wanting to save their own skin, and others fighting against doing that. One of them screamed, saying there was no time since the bomb would go off in 30 minutes, and others wondered where the hero was. Stardust thought to herself that it would be useless to advance on him while his subordinate still had another activation device. And then she looked at him and asked if he had fun playing with people. Ego said the fun was not that. In fact, he greatly admired Miss Stardust, a hero of justice. Stardust was embarrassed and asked what he was talking about. Then, he said that seeing her in this situation, unable to do anything, completely powerless, that was what he found entertaining. Then, Ego said he would give her a chance to participate in the game and would connect her with those waiting for a hero. Stardust did not understand what he meant. While looking at her, our villain explained that if she managed to encourage them, and neither side pressed the button within 30 minutes, Ego sat down and crossed his legs, completing, "The bomb will not explode." Stardust looked at him and asked how she could trust him, and Kim answered it was better than standing there doing nothing. She clenched her fists at the answer. Ego then pointed at the drones, and they began heading toward the hero. Now she was the center of attention. Everyone was watching her on the screens across the city. She stared at the cameras without saying anything, until she introduced herself to everyone and greeted them, saying every person carries a belief in their heart. Ego was impressed. That was what he had wanted all along. He would be marked by the public as the villain who caused terror, and she only had to show her radiant image, because this stage was for her. Stardust continued, saying that today they would show this villain that we are strong. Everyone started calming down while she spoke, saying the belief we carry is unshakable, and we will never bow to evil. Ego started opening a smile. The countdown had only 5 seconds left. Everyone waited while the count decreased. Stardust looked at the last second on the screen until it reached 0. Ego stared, knowing this was the moment. Stardust stood still while Kim screamed, saying this was impossible, and that the selfish humans had not pressed the buttons. He screamed at the cameras, saying there should have been at least one selfish person just like him. Stardust got his attention and said people were not as selfish as he thought. She finished by saying, not everyone can be altruistic, but she believed in human goodness. Ego then said it was because of her that they had united, and right after said that was interesting. Then he bowed, while Stardust advanced to attack him. He looked at her, impressed, that gaze full of justice she had. Then he vanished in the middle of her strike, saying he would certainly win the next game. Everyone in the building celebrated, crying with happiness, and those who had been watching started screaming her name. Stardust looked at the palm of her hand in silence. Meanwhile, Ego teleported and then dropped hard to the ground. He kept saying he was going to die because the side effect of his teleportation was that his body received damage equivalent to the distance traveled. Ego complained, saying he would be bedridden for about 2 days until Seo appeared, saying he should not have used that hat. She right after said it was very tacky and made him look like a fifth-rate villain. Then, she walked away while Kim froze on the ground. Meanwhile, Stardust looked at everyone happy. She could not believe he had been playing with people's hearts, and next time she would catch him. As for Ego, he was being hydrated by his sister Seo. The scene cut to the Korean Heroes Association. Headlines were already spreading in the media, and they were also analyzing data on Ego. Then, the association president ordered the briefing to begin. He had already seen that scene too many times and asked them to skip ahead. Right after, he explained the case of the bomb apparently fixed to the external wall of the building using teleportation. The high-performance homemade bomb had enough power to blow up the entire observatory. Then, the president asked if there were no leads on the signal hijacking, and the assistant answered it was still a mystery how he managed to bypass the most recent security technology. However, they were considering the possibility of an accomplice with significant technological capability. Finally, he said there was one more thing to say. He seemed to be obsessed with Stardust, because he had left a message for her at the previous crime scene, and it was confirmed he mentioned her directly in this incident. Then, the director asked what she thought of that bastard personally. She placed her hand on the table without saying anything, and finally answered that he seemed like a psychopath who played with people. The scene cut to 2 days later, in a room with Kim complaining about pain. Some time passed, and he decided to grab a drink from the fridge until he spat when Seo asked if he was drinking straight from the bottle again. She looked at him with anger. Kim looked at her, saying to himself this girl calls him Hyung in the original work later on. Also, she becomes a Class S villain and a genius hacker, and the two have an underground base below Seo's house. She asked him not to drink straight from the bottle. Our villain gave a faint smile and then touched her head, saying he understood. Suddenly, she pulled him hard, telling them to go quickly. The scene shifted to a technological door. Inside, Seo asked if he remembered the allied candidate, and Kim asked if it was the one who seemed like his fan. Then, she pointed at the screen. There was an attack happening by Ego's followers. Kim asked what she was doing there. Seo showed her, a masked girl who was visibly very nervous. Kim went serious because of this attack and asked Seo what rule the two of them had. She turned to listen to him, and then our villain slammed the table saying, "Never kill civilians." He said he would handle those guys and asked if Seo could help him. She just nodded in confirmation and then asked about that girl. Kim answered he would assess the situation and decide later. Then, the scene shifted to Stardust in front of a fire. She had a very serious expression. The hero decided to request permission to enter, and the police asked her to wait for the negotiation attempt. Stardust started getting even more irritated, telling herself all of this was Ego's fault. Before that, the attacks had been practically exclusive to villains with powers, but her image was being put under pressure by him. Suddenly, the police warned that Ego had appeared at the scene and was streaming live on YouTube. Without thinking twice, she pulled out her phone and watched the live. There were many comments, and the stream was trending #1. Ego's followers pointed their weapons, asking who he was, until one of them realized. It was their hero, Mr. Ego. They started celebrating because he had really come. Ego complained because he had come all the way here with another teleport, and his whole body ached because of them. The followers noticed he seemed strange until they were startled by Ego laughing uncontrollably and saying this was fun. Seo warned Kim that the guy behind the pillar would activate the bomb at 3 o'clock. Suddenly, Ego attacked him and then blew him up. One of them screamed, saying that was not Mr. Ego, and he was certainly a police lackey in disguise. Everyone at the scene started getting tense. One of the followers' weapons started floating, and then Ego pointed all the weapons against them. Kim laughed, saying he had never had followers as clueless as them. The smoke in the building started rising. Meanwhile, the comments in the live were a complete mess. The police authorized Stardust to enter the building. A disguised girl was being held at gunpoint. SEO communicated to Ego, saying she had been forced to come here by other followers. Then, Ego started walking toward her while she screamed. He touched the girl's mask and then threw it far away. That was Lee, crying and apologizing to Kim. Everyone watched while she cried like a baby. Then, Ego laughed and said if she kept crying it would get worse. The girl immediately shut her mouth, and Ego turned to face the public. He bowed and apologized, saying the attack had happened because of him. The people watching the live asked themselves what he was doing. Ego continued, saying that for the people who had been harmed, compensation would be sent to their bank accounts. He thought to himself that CEO would handle it if they traced it, and then he grabbed Lee and took her to the hideout, but the impact of the teleportation had left him without the strength to carry her. Suddenly, a hole opened in the wall. Ego was stunned, stuttering. Stardust? Then she stared back at him as if time had stopped. The scene shifted to Yanhee University. Inside a cafeteria, a news story was playing about a villain who took responsibility and compensated the victims. The one reading that news in the cafeteria was a girl. The comments were mocking Ego's new nickname. Shin, Stardust, touched her forehead reading them, and also remembered the moment she flew toward him. The explosion had caused a massive impact. Ego had been standing looking at her. She looked at him, determined that this time she would catch him. Then, she advanced in the blink of an eye. Ego ducked, dodging the strike. Stardust had no reaction, but Ego had already escaped. Returning to the present, she was completely distracted, until Che arrived asking what was going on with her. Shin kept writing in her notebook and answered everything was fine, and she was just distracted. Shin was the real name of the Class A hero, but she had never been discovered since she wore an anti-recognition filter. She was not such an ordinary university student, and she kept worrying about Ego. She even wrote his name in her notebook, but she could not understand why the hell he had saved the hostages. Her friend cut in and touched her cheek. She laughed, saying Shin had that grumpy face on again, then asked what she thought about setting work aside for now and eating mango. Shin slammed the table with happiness, screaming, "Mango!" Suddenly, she remembered Ego laughing uncontrollably, and then she started getting angry. Che realized that not even mango could solve this problem of hers. Shin snapped her pen, saying the mango was hers, but she kept being irritated because Ego was polluting her brain, until her friend put a piece of mango in her mouth. At the house in Seoul, she had an ordinary appearance. When opening the front door, there was another door beside the entrance. When the second door opened, there was an elevator with an open door, and after entering the elevator and typing a numerical combination, the door finally closed and began going down. Dozens of underground floors passed, and the place we were taken to was Ego's base. Kim was resting and was calling his base the Ego base. SEO asked why he kept naming other people's homes, but he answered her house was his house and his house was her house. CEO answered that made no sense. Kim turned his knee to keep talking, but he slammed hard against the capsule, while CEO told him to stop being dramatic. Ego asked her not to be so harsh since he had teleported with someone on his shoulder and the effort had doubled. He talked to himself about the superhuman SEO with super intelligence. Meanwhile, she was looking for the page where she had stopped reading her book. Kim said it was not for that reason that he had recruited her as an ally, but the fatigue recovery capsule was too much, until someone pointed a finger doing a thumbs up sign at CEO and was entering through the front door. Then she looked at Ego and apologized because the fridge was empty. Right after, she stuttered in embarrassment, asking if they wanted a snack, and also explained she had used bangs to hide her face since she was being searched for. CEO closed her book and jumped off the bed all bright and cheerful. Ego could not believe CEO had brought her just to make deliveries. Then, he got out of the capsule and asked why she had brought her. CEO answered it was to ask for her help, and Kim went crazy. He asked what guarantee they had that she would not start a shootout right there in the house, and CEO answered it was nothing like that. She had not even wanted to participate in the attack, and had been forced by Ego's followers. Then, Seo asked if she was Lee, and the girl asked how she knew her name. The assistant bragged and answered she knew everything. Her parents were researchers from the Haeun group? She asked. Lee was startled and asked how she knew that too. SEO started approaching, saying she had seen the posts she had made on the deep web and asked if she did not want to get revenge too. Lee listened to everything while Seo talked. Then Jin, Seo, explained she was looking for the Haeun group leaders because she had also suffered greatly at their hands. She finished saying she would only have peace when she crushed every single one of them and asked if Lee would help. Meanwhile, Ego analyzed the conversation. When he had recruited Seo as his first ally, he had convinced her by saying he would help with her revenge, but he also had an objective of stopping her from becoming a Class S villain in the future. He did not remember seeing this girl Lee in the original work, and she was basically an extra with no impact at all. Suddenly, our villain saw the two hugging and crying. He had no reaction and did not know what to do. He kept looking at the two hugging, wondering if it was just him not feeling the emotion at that moment. Then, he decided to stay quiet and watch, until suddenly he went back into the recovery capsule. Sometime later, we were taken to a restaurant. In the distance, there was a woman who seemed to be crying. She nervously asked herself why he had done that to her. Suddenly, a guy with purple hair explained he had only said he liked her and asked if she had to be so shaken. A guard appeared saying they had received a report, and the purple-haired guy asked to be left to eat in peace. But the guard touched his shoulder, saying he would consider this as resisting arrest, until suddenly he started releasing red energy. The guard appeared on top of the building. He turned, hearing the purple-haired guy grumbling. Then, he kicked the guard off the top of the building, telling him to go on ahead. That was Hawk, a Class A villain with a teleporter power. Suddenly, the scene shifted to Stardust, and a villain asking if she thought the world would change if she defeated her. That was Haseo, the White Witch, a Class S villain. But suddenly, that thought was interrupted by Seo asking if it was him who drank all the juice. Lee, embarrassed, apologized, and answered it had been her. Then, Seo came from behind and hugged her, answering that everything was fine. Meanwhile, Ego was sulking because she only got annoyed with him. Then, he asked her if she had given up pretending to be a man, which made her furious, and her screams echoed through the entire street. Sometime later, they were in the planning room. Kim looked at Seo, the human with superintelligence. In the past, the Haeun group conducted illegal experiments, and one day, one of the tests manifested an unexpected side effect, which caused everyone involved to die in the building, except Seo. She was lying among the rubble. After that, she escaped the facility injured and hid underground where she built the current base. She had lived hidden alone for years, until one day he found her. Suddenly, the chair fell hard to the ground. Seo was startled, but Ego asked if she did not want to get revenge and that he needed her help. She was trembling a lot. Then, our villain extended his hand and said he had not come to hurt her. In fact, he had come to save her. In the original work, because of a desire for revenge, she becomes a Class A villain and ends up losing her life. He told himself that now she was already his accomplice, and either way, he would guide her in the right direction. Seo turned to him and asked what he was looking at. After all, he would not even understand what was on the panel. Ego kept quiet, now looking at Lee. Her parents were researchers who entered a prestigious university studying alone. He looked at her while saying her specialty was computer engineering, and in the future she would probably help Seo with hacking. Kim had his guard up because he did not know her from the original work, but above all, she cooked very well. Suddenly, Seo said she had finished the adhesive tracking sensor. Ego approached and asked what it was for, and then she asked if he had already forgotten their main job. She pointed at the panel showing the villain, Hawk. Ego knew him. That guy could teleport endlessly without receiving any punishment. Seo said the more troublesome the enemy, the faster they had to deal with him, so she cheerfully told him to get to work. The scene shifted to another establishment. Ego was in the building with Seo telling him to hurry in. He explained right there that, due to the bullet with a teleport tracker, he would catch him. Kim looked at the weapon, not understanding, and she said she had made it faster than a bullet. He asked if it would not be better to just shoot him on the street, and she screamed, saying she had already set up the ideal plan. Meanwhile, Lee was cheering for him until she said, "Ego, you got this." Seo looked at her and muttered, "You got this, Ego." Kim laughed and thanked the two of them. Then, suddenly, he teleported while Hawk was in the shower. He slowly turned toward our villain. Ego pointed the weapon while Seo screamed for him to shoot. The bullet and the tracker went directly into Hawk. Ego threw the weapon away since he had lost sight of him and asked if the tracker had connected. Seo answered yes and asked Lee to relay the location. Kim started teleporting while they communicated that Hawk was 500 meters to the east. He appeared in the middle of a crowd with several people stunned. Ego tried to ignore it, since this certainly was not in the plan. People had already posted comments on a live of him in the middle of the city. Meanwhile, in the university lecture hall, Shin and Che were sitting. Shin received a message to spring into action due to Ego's appearance in the center. She was startled by the message and slammed the table, screaming. But right after, she apologized to everyone in the lecture hall. Che looked at her leaving without saying anything. Outside, Shin flew to go after Ego. Suddenly, Seo warned him that Hawk was right ahead at the intersection. He had apparently been shot. The street signal turned red, and Ego used the moment to stop him right on the crosswalk. SEO screamed, warning Ego. A truck was coming at high speed in his direction. Our villain was completely frozen with no reaction, and the scene shifted to some people on a bridge at night. They were asking Hawk if he enjoyed running away with their money. One of them got annoyed with Hawk screaming and saying he would pay the debt. Then he placed the cigarette on the rope and answered, "No." Hawk screamed, saying he was wrong, and begged for just one more chance, but right after he fell into free fall into the sea. He was completely desperate, and before hitting the water, he screamed he would curse them until he fell into the water but with a red energy. Suddenly, he teleported to the top of the bridge. Everyone slowly turned, startled. Not even Hawk himself knew what had happened, but they did not think twice and chased after him. Hawk looked at his hands while they approached. Then, he clenched his fists, saying there was nobody in this world who could stop him, and right after teleported, making the people chasing him crash into each other, and so we returned to the truck braking. The entire area went quiet. Ego had been transported inside the truck, and right after stepped out. Hawk said he had timed it right but still had not caught him. Then he teleported to a balcony. He was nervous, asking himself if taking out two villains had been personal for Ego. Hawk looked at the street, saying this had nothing to do with him. Kim screamed, getting his attention, saying it was his time to go to hell. He ground his teeth, asking if he only hunted villains. Ego teleported, saying trash goes in the trash, and villain trash would go in the coffin. But then they appeared in the middle of the crowd, and right after teleported further away with Ego muttering. Hawk grabbed a woman's clothing, desperately wondering why he was still hearing his voice, until he threw her into the middle of the sidewalk. Ego teleported and grabbed her head. He looked at the woman and asked if she was okay. Meanwhile, Hawk was losing strength, coughing blood, and he asked why it was him of all people who was there. Suddenly, he dropped to the ground. Ego's shadow appeared behind him, and he pointed the weapon at Hawk, saying his sins condemned him. Ego stopped to think that he was also a villain, but at least not a worm like him. Then he screamed for everyone to hear, asking if they should let him live since he had stolen billions and taken out innocents. The citizens did not hesitate in their answer, and all of them wanted the same thing: justice. Hawk screamed, asking what made him different from them deciding something like that. Ego laughed because he knew Hawk's sins would grow when he became a Class S villain in the future and would trouble Stardust. So, he asked if he thought they were the same, and suddenly, Ego did the job as promised. He turned to look around. Everyone there was happy and celebrating for what he had done. Ego asked himself if everyone was not supposed to be scared and screaming. He really could not get used to the people of this world. It was surprisingly similar to his own. Then, he decided to take off his hat and bowed, thanking everyone. After that, he pointed the weapon, asking if they were not scared since he was a villain. Everyone looked at him confused, not understanding anything, until he heard someone calling his name. Ego looked at Stardust approaching, and right after, she landed in front of him. He froze, his heart pounding. She always changed her forced old drama tone of voice when she disguised herself as a hero. Then, she asked him what he had done, while he was screaming internally, calling her adorable. But he decided to answer, saying he had eliminated a Class A teleporter villain, which was a job for a hero to do. She ground her teeth, calling him a bass. Ego cut in, asking what the problem was. Stardust then asked if he was a hero, and he answered he was a villain. He realized this was the opening to compliment Stardust, since there were a lot of people filming. Then he clapped and said he admired that strong conviction of justice she had. However, everyone around Stardust was complaining about her. She showed up after everything was already over. Ego was stunned, saying it was not supposed to be like this. Even Seo was screaming in the communicator, asking him to stop embarrassing himself. Then he tried to say goodbye quickly, saying he would continue with his villainy like a good villain, and suddenly vanished right in front of her. Stardust stood quiet without saying anything. She was standing in front of the villain, then decided to approach and looked with a sad expression. Suddenly, the scene shifted to Ego teleporting to the base. SEO called Lee to help him. She explained to Lee it was a side effect of the ability. Then, the two of them each grabbed one of his hands and then tried to drag him. Suddenly, his phone started vibrating. A poll had been posted asking who thought the Mangastic, Ego's fan nickname, was better than the bossy Stardust. Sometime later, on the top of a building at night, Stardust was looking at the news about Ego. She dropped the phone and looked down sadly, alone in front of that city. The scene shifted to an alley with 3 people. It was Shin crying with her parents on the ground. The thief was closing the wallet, saying she should have handed it over when he asked. Then, he pointed the weapon at Shin. She looked at him with her eyes full of tears. He pulled the cigarette from his mouth in silence, and right after laughed, saying she was lucky, and threw the cigarette, leaving her alone. He walked away while Stardust cried. Suddenly, she slammed the ground with everything, saying that if she had the power to protect her mother and father, then she embraced her mother, saying she would take that bastard out. She remained there while the rain fell, until a beam of light appeared in the sky and landed near the alley where she was. She lifted her head, looking at the beam of light. The glow was starting to expand, until the alley where she was became slightly illuminated, and she was passed out with her hair now blonde. Then we returned to our villain's hideout. He was practically waking up, and Seo was staring at him through the capsule glass and right after told him to listen while eating. She looked at the phone, saying they were going over the facts about the Class A villain Ego. He had eliminated the villain Rhino and the Zodiac villain, Class A and Class S, and also a special to give the bored citizens a bit of excitement, the Observatory Dilemma broadcast. Right after, he had reprimanded his own followers and paid compensation to the hostages. Lastly, he eliminated the Class A teleporter villain, which the Heroes Association itself admitted was very difficult to catch. She finished saying he had 7,842 likes and 12 dislikes, but Ego only wanted to know about Stardust. SEO told him to shut it, saying it was always her he wanted. While CEO was reading the comments, he asked in shock why people were criticizing Stardust. Then, she answered, it seemed it was because out of the 3 Class A heroes, she was the one with the fewest achievements. Ego asked if the majority reacted like that, and Seo answered that was what they said about her. Meanwhile, the villain Egostic had even gained a fan base. Kim screamed, calling them crazy and asking what was this about a villain fan club. Then he got up saying he could not let things stay like this. Seo and Lee had no reaction since he had asked for their help in another plan. He explained he needed to show who the real villain was and who the real hero was. Meanwhile, Shin was drinking a mango frap until she became a little dissociated. Petals were falling near the cafe. She remembered people saying it was a farce. Then, she sighed lightly. The citizens were more excited about Ego, who simply takes out villains, than about the heroes who only give light penalties. Suddenly, she slapped her own face, trying to focus. Che asked in the background why she was slapping herself. Then, she came close, saying the day was beautiful and she should take it easy. Right after, she asked if Shin wanted to see something funny. She showed the Ego fan base and said she had been liking him lately. Shin ground her teeth, wondering if even Che liked that guy, until Che received a notification that Ego was going live, and Shin received a notification from the association. She got up, telling Che she had something unexpected, and apologized. Then, she ran quickly to the exit, asking Ego to wait for her. Meanwhile, near a train track, our villain was introducing himself to the citizens. Everyone was excited in the live comments. Ego looked at his phone. Lately, he had been getting a lot of messages. Then he laughed, saying it seemed like they were a little confused, and started directing the phone toward a place. It was directly at one person on one track and 5 more on another. He warned everyone the train was coming. The people on the live all had no idea what was going on, and only one comment said he was crazy about Stardust. Then he started explaining the rules of the game. Leaving the lever as it was would save one person, but pulling it would save 5 people, and the other would say goodbye. Lee was on the train, while Ego explained that if she removed the people from the track, he would derail the train. Then, he raised a finger saying her only option was to pull the lever. Suddenly she appeared, landing from the sky. She analyzed. If she tried to save them, the train passengers would be in danger. So she closed her eyes, trying to think of how she could save everyone. Meanwhile, Ego was screaming, telling her to hurry, and the comments were agitated with divided opinions. Ego sighed confidently because he knew the Stardust he knew was not the type to give up. Suddenly, she started running toward the train. Lee was nervous while Seo calmed her, saying Stardust would not hurt her. Ego turned on the microphone and screamed, asking why Miss Stardust was doing that. Suddenly, she collided head-on with the train and started trying to push it. Stardust told herself she had to hold on just a little longer. The train kept moving, and she realized the speed was starting to increase. Ego was startled because something was wrong. Lee had fainted without controlling the train. Ego had really not expected that, while Stardust was straining to stop the train. We returned to Ego looking at Shin before the train arrived, until she ran, deciding to hold the train. Ego laughed, saying everything was going according to plan. Going back a little more to the moment Ego was placing the hostages on the track, and then placed the woman on the track. Kim tied her up, saying he was extremely tired, until he finished the knot. Then, he teleported to the top of the mountain. He observed them from above with a certain pride. In the original work, Stardust gets stronger by defeating villains, but if Ego eliminates them, she loses the chance to get stronger. Then, he stopped drawing in the sand and said she should think of this as a special training camp he had prepared for her. And then we returned to the moment Stardust ran toward the train. The comments were going crazy. Ego laughed, saying it was not exactly what he had planned. Suddenly, she collided head-on with the train. Our villain looked at her, realizing she was still a Class A hero, and it would be impossible for her to stop that train. But Stardust had a characteristic in her that others did not know, which meant she could stop the train. Suddenly, the train started accelerating. The force between her and the train was increasing. Ego was startled. If someone died on the tracks, he panicked, saying Stardust's suffering route would be activated without a doubt. Meanwhile, the train was still at high speed. Stardust was straining. She started concentrating energy in her feet and hands, and then started screaming, still trying to hold the train. Ego was begging for her to make it. The train was almost reaching the people on the track until he noticed something. The train had barely stopped. Ego laughed with relief because at least they had avoided the suffering route. Now, Stardust was still covered in smoke. Our hero looked at his phone wondering if she had been abducted, until she appeared through the smoke, completely exhausted, and Ego exploded with happiness right after. Then, he quickly returned to his composed villain posture, impressed she had held on. He looked at her still standing there. The comments were talking about the situation and about how Mangastic was Stardust's biggest fan. He laughed because that was the reaction he had expected. That was definitely the hero called Stardust. Suddenly, she started falling, and then she dropped unconscious to the ground. Ego was startled for a brief moment and immediately teleported to her. He looked at her in silence while she called him a bastard. Stardust opened her eyes slightly. Ego was covering her vision, saying the victory was hers, and in a way he had not even imagined. Then, he closed her eyes, telling her to rest well, and she remained there on the ground. Ego got up, saying his attack ended here, and thanked everyone who had watched. The transmission ended right after. An anonymous commenter posted asking what vibe that was between the two, but the scene cut to Seo screaming for them to get up. Seo looked at them, saying they were being soft like that just over a little attack. Then she showed the food prepared on the table. Lee was amazed, asking if she had made that, and Ego touched her head, thanking her. But Seo got flustered and pinched his waist and told him to eat before the food got cold. Then the three sat at the table. Lee started eating and was completely amazed by the food. Seo turned quickly and grabbed the remote on the table. She sat on the couch to watch the news. Then she turned, calling them to watch how they were covering yesterday's events. Ego answered, bragging that his villain identity must have been solidified. Suddenly, Lee and Kim looked at Seo screaming. The news was saying the two were dating. The scene shifted to another location. Someone was watching the photo of the two of them together. It was Shin listening to the newscast say their relationship did not look like villain and hero, but rather a couple. Then she slammed the cup on the table with everything, and the two of them simultaneously screamed, "What the hell is this?" Inside the newscast, the host was asking the reporter the reason for the dating rumor. Then, the reporter Park pointed at the image with a message on the wall. Right after, he slammed the table, saying it was not just a message, it was written, "A gift for you, Stardust." And then, he showed Ego closing her eyes and saying she had been wonderful. Park screamed, asking if that was not love, then what else could it be, and showed that Stardust had fallen asleep in peace after his words. Shin paused the video after class ended. She was alone in the auditorium, asking herself if they had lost their minds. A dating rumor with that crazy villain. She went quiet for a moment, then told herself she certainly had hatred and repulsion, but it seemed like there was a strange feeling mixed in. Suddenly, Che came close to her. She looked and said Shin had a worn-out face because of work. Then, she showed ice cream, saying she would cure her today. She came close affectionately, saying she could trust her friend. The scene shifted to Seo throwing a tantrum and Lee trying to calm her down. Jin screamed, saying they had done 2 attacks and she wanted to go out too, until she stood up in the blink of an eye with Kim, saying they would all go together. Right after, she screamed with happiness. Meanwhile, Ego looked at the poster saying this was not in the original work, but what could go wrong? Then, the scene shifted to Shin thinking about the ice cream festival. Arriving there, Ego was impressed by the number of people. SEO told him he was wearing black again, and he answered her that men always wear black. She laughed, saying it had nothing to do with that. Ego was impressed seeing her smiling like that. He looked at her happy because she seemed to be in a good mood, until she ran toward the rice ice cream stall. Ego asked if it had been a good idea to go out, and Lee agreed, seeing that Seo was loving it. Kim then tried one of the stall's ice creams. He had not expected it to be so good. Then, he offered Lee to try it. She had no reaction at all. Seo asked what the problem was and told her to try it. While the spoon was approaching, she wondered if this was an indirect kiss, until she tried the ice cream. Seo finished the last piece of ice cream, then without thinking twice spotted a mango ice cream stall. She looked at it with her mouth watering, and asked for a cone for herself. The vendor looked at Ego, saying she was so cute and just like her parents. Kim looked at Seo awkwardly, but she whispered to him, saying he had an old man face. Meanwhile, the vendor was preparing the scoop of ice cream, and there it was, a cone and 2 small cups. Seo said since he was the mango squad leader, he should also eat mango ice cream. The vendor repeated, "Mango squad?" He got a little suspicious, so Ego tried to explain it was nothing until he was startled. The vendor showed the outfit he had made himself, asking if it looked good. Seo gave him a thumbs up and answered it looked great. Sometime later, the 3 were eating on a bench until Ego looked at a stall. It was a dart throwing stall. Then he said he would show Seo his skills. She cut in and asked if he was not going to cheat using telekinesis. The scene cut to inside the stall. The vendor was showing the prizes, and Seo screamed saying she wanted the 2nd place prize, the stuffed bear. Ego asked the vendor if he won 1st place. Could he choose? And she answered yes. Then, he answered confidently that he would get the bear for Seo. Ego focused, saying he just had to pretend to concentrate and use a little telekinesis until suddenly Che arrived asking how much a round cost. Kim realized and recognized who this girl was. She was Shin's senior from university until Che looked back with someone saying to let her take the prize. Kim was paralyzed while Seo asked if he was not going to play until suddenly blonde hair appeared behind him. The 3 were completely startled. Shin looked to the side. Ego was completely frozen standing beside her. The scene went back to moments before, with Che dragging Shin to a stall. Then she offered Shin ice cream to try. Shin accepted and tried it, and was impressed by how good it was. Che was happy because she had finally opened a smile until Shin looked at a stall. Then Che did not think twice and took her there. It was the mango flavor stall. Shin was amazed just hearing the word mango, but right after got annoyed. The vendor was showing off the outfit he had made of the mangostic. Then, the 2 sat on a nearby bench. Che decided to ask if she liked it, and Shin answered she loved it. Then, she closed her eyes. The 2 went quiet. It had been a long time since she had gone out to see a view like this, and she breathed deeply, enjoying the moment, until Che screamed, pointing at a dart throwing stall. Shin looked at her excitedly, then laughed, saying it seemed fun. Some time had passed, and the 2 were approaching the stall until Shin looked to the side. She analyzed, saying they seemed like a young couple, but the daughter having silver hair seemed more like a niece. Then she looked at Kim, realizing she had seen him somewhere before. Che cut in and screamed excitedly, telling her to shoot, and right after she hit the balloon, Ego looked at her, telling himself that Stardust's abilities were super strength and flight, but her super strength was not just brute force. Stardust prepared another dart and hit the target again. Meanwhile, Ego was saying that for now, she could only get strong when she wanted to, but in the future she would become a superhuman who surpassed the body's limits. Also, she instinctively perceived when something was wrong. In short, Ego was worried because she could sense that he was the famous villain, and everyone would go straight to jail because of Stardust. Suddenly, another balloon exploded. Che was congratulating her on the 10th hit, and she said it had been nothing. Then, the vendor, as promised, gave the prize, the 10-layer ice cream. The vendor then turned, asking if Ego was going to play, and he answered he had gotten distracted because the lady beside him had played very well. Then, he turned, telling Seo to pay attention to his skill. Kim grabbed several darts, saying he would play either way without telekinesis and get out of there. Immediately, he threw all the darts and all the balloons popped one after another. Ego froze, asking himself how that had worked. Che turned, saying the guy beside them was also very good, and the vendor appeared with the stuffed bear they had asked for, but they were already getting out of there. Shin grabbed the bear and said she would return it to them, when suddenly, Che knocked the ice cream onto the top of the stall. They were falling toward Ego, but if he got involved with them at all, it was definitely the bad ending route. So, he screamed in shock, trying to avoid this at all costs, and then threw himself, dodging all the ice cream balls. Che asked if he was okay while Seo and Lee ran toward him. Then, she asked him to give her his number so she could pay for the dry cleaning, but Ego deflected, saying everything was fine and he had just overreacted. Then, he saw Seo and Lee getting the stuffed bear from Stardust, so he called the 2 of them to go. But suddenly, they turned, startled. A massive cloud of smoke was rising in the middle of the crowd, and a creature was revealed in the middle of it. That was the Crocodile Man, a Class A villain, screaming and demanding that Stardust appear. Ego hugged Seo and Lee to protect them. He told himself this was not supposed to happen and wondered why he had started acting all of a sudden. Meanwhile, Shin was dragging Che away running. Ego analyzed the situation. Stardust would not have time to go to the association and get her disguise. The hero he knew would probably stop that villain right now, but that would reveal her face and the suffering route would begin. Then he went crazy, saying this would only happen over his dead body. Ego started screaming, concentrating his teleportation energy. The ability takes a few seconds to teleport all three, until, in the blink of an eye, Ego had changed into his disguise, while Seo asked what he was going to do. But Ego just looked at her, saying he needed support on the transmission. Back at the location, the crocodile was screaming, saying he would destroy the place if she did not appear, until he turned, hearing someone introducing himself. Ego spoke into the radio, saying he was the true villain of this era. He laughed, saying, "Public enemy number 1, this is Egostic." Then he screamed, calling the crocodile a piece of lizard trash and asking if he thought this was his territory. The live comments were already going crazy, and Ego smiled, saying now he was all ready. We went back 3 years earlier, in the association classroom. A man was describing the device called the anti-recognition filter, also known as AT. When entering and exiting the device, the AT is applied to the face for a certain time. But then, he explained that if someone showed their face directly to a person who already knew them, the filter would not work. Right after, he said he believed there was no idiot out there who did not know how dangerous it was for a hero to be exposed, and asked them to remember that. In the back, Stardust was screaming in agreement. The scene returned to the chaos at the ice cream stalls. Shin realized it was already too late to go to the association and get the filter, so she clenched her fists. She stood in the middle of people running, asking herself if she had become a hero just to run away in a situation like this. Right after, she started pulling her hair tie out and then began leaving Che behind, when suddenly, she looked at some people watching Egostic's live. While Ego held the microphone, he repeated to himself that personal life was very important for a hero. Then, he screamed, calling the crocodile a piece of lizard trash. He responded, asking if Ego was not the Egostic who was dating Stardust. Suddenly, the crocodile leapt quickly and grabbed onto the building where Ego was and started climbing toward our villain. He drove his claws into the top of the building and then launched himself upward with everything. He stood face to face with Ego and decided to advance to apply a suplex on him. But Ego teleported to the top of his head, asking what he was doing. Right after, he hit him on the head. Then the lizard advanced, calling him a cursed mosquito, but our villain dodged the attacks, correcting him by saying he was a villain. Ego froze at the comments right after what he had said. Everyone was asking what he was doing there. So he told the crocodile to wait and listen to what he had to say, and screamed, asking why he had attacked him out of nowhere. The crocodile answered it was obvious. He had been targeting Stardust, but it seemed like he also had interest in her, so he was his enemy too. The comments were still talking about our villain and Stardust. To finish things off, the crocodile pointed at him, saying it was he who had said he would attack him first. Then he repeated what Ego had said. "Hey, you piece of lizard trash, you think this is your territory? Now you are finished." Egostic then mocked his face and said he had not asked him anything. The crocodile lost his patience and screamed, going furious, and then started charging an attack directly from his mouth. Ego froze, asking himself what that was. Then, the lizard released the attack. Black initial impact of the crocodile. Unlimited reinforcement superpower. But Ego teleported above him. He sighed with relief because if he had been hit, he would have died instantly. Meanwhile, the crocodile asked if he had liked it. Ego wasted no time and started pulling something from his cape and pointed several weapons at the crocodile. Well, the lizard. Then he clenched his fist, saying they would see each other in hell. Right after, the weapons started firing without stopping. Ego gained distance, asking himself if he had won. But suddenly the crocodile appeared, asking if he thought those bullets would hurt him. Ego dropped his mask and switched it for a gas one and answered that was not how he let his guard down. He released an attack in his direction. The crocodile had his mouth wide open screaming at Ego, which made him perfectly swallow the attack. Right after, an energy started forming in his stomach and spreading through his body. Ego told himself that Stardust had suffered a lot because of this lizard, so that was why he had come prepared. Meanwhile, the crocodile was smoking and then dropped hard to the ground, with comments calling Egostic a hero. The weapons controlled by telekinesis also started falling. Ego teleported to the ground, but his vision was starting to sway. He was dizzy from having used too much energy, and even lifting his phone was difficult, until he turned and read a comment asking if Ego had come to take out a villain. He got up and started explaining, saying he had not come because of Stardust. Suddenly, a yellow beam of light hit the building. Stardust immediately landed, then asked if it had been Ego who had defeated the crocodile. He answered yes, because the crocodile was getting in the way. Stardust slowly asked him why. Then he explained it was because that lizard was screaming that she and he were dating, and it was irritating him, until he heard Seo talking in the communicator. Then he told Miss Stardust to never again think about revealing her face, because the moment she did, her life would become hell. Shin froze, not knowing what to say. Ego told the viewers the transmission was ending for today, and they could expect something big next month. Suddenly, Ego teleported, while Stardust was asking him to wait. Then, she stood there looking without saying a word. Ego dropped to the ground after the teleport and started coughing blood. He was completely drained and out of breath. Then, he collapsed while Lee and Seo ran to help. Back to Stardust, she picked up the mask Ego had dropped. She looked at it, wondering how he knew what she was thinking, and what his identity was after all. The scene shifted to Shin's room. The news about the chaos and the speed with which Ego had resolved the situation was spreading, and there were many comments praising the villain Egostic. Shin touched her forehead, feeling confused, until she decided to look at a few more things. She saw a comment about people idolizing a villain, but then she opened the full comment and saw them celebrating. She lay down on the bed, saying everyone liked Egostic except her. Shin remembered the vendor showing his Mangostic shirt, and also Ego telling her never to risk revealing her identity again. Then, she looked at the ceiling, considering that maybe she was wrong and everyone else was right. Meanwhile, Seo looked at the recovery capsule alongside Lee. She looked at Ego, saying it was all Stardust's fault, until she was left speechless. Kim tapped the capsule glass, smiling. He looked at them, asking why they had those teary faces. Then, Seo hugged him, crying. After being out for 3 days, Ego joined the two of them to eat. Seo told him to take better care of his own body next time. He looked at Jin, telling himself she still worried about him. Lee cut in and asked why he had been so fast. Anyone would think he was a hero. Seo agreed with her, and whoever only talks about being a villain is a villain. Ego answered that if he had not shown up, Stardust would have. Seo cut in, asking what the problem with that was. While she looked at him, he answered, it was fatal. If a hero revealed their face, their identity would be exposed. Seo then asked what that had to do with them. Ego answered that the world they lived in was asymmetrical, the asymmetry between good and evil. Most superhumans do not become heroes. They take the villain path and the reward for effort is small, so most choose an easy life as a villain. In Korea, there were only 3 Class A heroes: Stardust, Icicle, and Shadow Walker. Seo then stated there were more Class A villains, so Ego was eliminating most of them in place of the heroes, and called him a noble anti-hero. Then, she asked if it was not because of that woman, Stardust. Ego cut in, that woman? And asked her to speak nicely. Then, Seo started staring at him while Lee tried to calm things down, and decided to change the subject, asking Seo why she did not tell Mr. It Kim what they had talked about before. Seo quickly turned to Ego and said summer was coming, and called him to travel to the beach. Ego said vaguely that it sounded great. Seo celebrated all excited, but Ego said before that they needed to do one more attack. He analyzed to himself, saying it was to guarantee that someone like the crocodile would not show up and give Stardust a power-up. Seo seemed a bit bored and asked if after that they would really go on vacation. Ego extended his pinky and said he promised. Then, Jin joined her finger and cheerfully repeated, "Promised!" Right after, she went to prepare her bags, humming. Sometime later, Seo was planning alongside Kim. Both of his attacks had been terrestrial, the train and the observatory. Then, she said excitedly that this time they would go to the sky or water. Ego focused, trying to choose between water and sky. Suddenly, an idea struck him like lightning. Lee asked what he had thought of, and he answered. He was picturing a plane falling into the sea. Ego and Seo started laughing exactly like DC villains. Then the scene shifted to a plane. The passengers were cheerful, relaxed, and spread out until the lights went out. A couple got excited because in the dark, they would be able to see the sky better, until suddenly, only the seatback screens started lighting up, and it read, Ego's Live. While the plane flew, Ego was speaking and introducing himself on the live about the greatest quiz show with a prize. The husband asked the flight attendant what was happening, but Ego decided to explain that in the plane they were on, he had installed a bomb, and it was located in the left engine of the plane. The pilot was suddenly startled, trying to analyze something. The passengers started screaming. Then, Ego laughed, saying, "Let the games begin." Meanwhile, At the Heroes Association, Stardust was asking how long ago this incident had happened. The chief answered that even if she went, she could not do anything. She slammed the table, saying that was not something the association president should say, and she should go now regardless. Then he asked when he had said not to try. Suddenly someone appeared at the door saying, "What a pain!" Stardust immediately opened a smile. That was Shadow Walker, known as Hugh, the King of the Night. He answered the president that he was only going to the Jeju airport and then sleeping, and not to think about combat. Then he started teleporting Stardust. Sometime later, Shin thanked Hugh, who was clearly very unwell. Then she ran confidently at high speed until she stopped for a moment and landed on top of a building. She was completely speechless, wondering how she was going to stop that. The scene shifted to a few years earlier. Several villains were gathered at the location. They were listening to their leader say the capital was at their feet. That was Needle, a Class S villain, but someone interrupted him, saying he thought differently from them. One of them screamed in the middle of the crowd, asking who he was. Then Shadow Walker appeared, saying he was a hero, and right after, put on his gloves, calling them bastards. Needle asked if he knew where he was stepping. The goblin wondered how he had gotten there. Hugh stayed quiet, making the atmosphere heavy. Needle advanced with a right cross, screaming that it was his territory, then launched the strike directly at him. Hugh stood still, waiting for the strike to come, but suddenly it hit a structure. Needle was startled and on alert, and right after started looking for him. A smoke started covering the feet of one of the villains, and right after he was pulled into the ground. Actually, everyone was being covered by smoke. Needle got into position, saying he could not let his guard down. Behind them, the smoke started spreading across the ceiling. Suddenly, Hugh advanced behind him, but Needle exploded, releasing his energy against him. Then he turned, asking how he dared. But everything that was there was just a shadow dissolving. He started confusing Needle. Suddenly, he appeared behind him, saying he had said it was his territory. Then, he extended his hand apologizing, but this was his territory. Then, Needle entered Hugh's domain, until we returned to the moment Hugh was feeling unwell on the stairs after dropping Stardust off at the airport. Ego was watching through the panel, saying it had been a good job on his part, and so, he prepared his microphone to begin the plan. Egostic asked the passengers who were watching to join the long-awaited final quiz, but we went back 30 minutes earlier. Ego was telling the passengers to stay silent. Everyone was suspicious and watching. He started explaining the rules and told everyone to turn off their phones. Suddenly, a message arrived on the passengers' phones. The message showed a riddle quiz with 10 questions in total. Then he told the passengers to stay quiet and not copy from the friend beside them. The first one was, how many people fit in the Titanic's lifeboat? And there was only 1 minute to answer. A woman tried to peek at the phone next to her, but he noticed she had cheated, and she was eliminated. Right after, the man beside her was also eliminated for making noise, while the comments were tense. Time had run out, and he decided to show the answer to the first question, which was 9 people, and right after he answered because the lifeboat was brand new. While he laughed at his own joke, the panel of who would be eliminated from the cabins was processing. Then it revealed several who had been eliminated. Everyone was tense as time passed. Some were even screaming and throwing tantrums, until almost the majority had been eliminated, and only 1 person remained. Ego saw Stardust running toward the plane. He then answered that for the grand final round, he would conduct an interview where everyone's lives depended on a single word. Then he asked Mr. Diok what was his emotion being the last survivor, and he stuttered, saying it was a great responsibility. Ego warned him he could not make noise, but he said after all, a mistake like that could be forgiven, right, folks? Only right after, he was eliminated, with Ego saying he did not want to. Then, the entire plane started experiencing turbulence. The bomb exploded, making the plane fall into free fall. Ego said this was the moment for the hero to take the stage again. Stardust faced the falling plane in front of her, and was completely without reaction just like before. She asked the president what they should do. While she waited for the answer, he said to give up, and he was busy writing a letter of protest right now. Right after, she clenched her fist because he had hung up, since the president was calling him. Then, she dropped to her knees and started asking herself what she would do, until she remembered something. The moment she was in the rain watching her family on the ground, the promise she had made to her mother, and when she was alone in the alley in the rain. Suddenly, she slammed the ground and started crying, saying it was just like that time. There was nobody she could save, someone connected to the communicator. She froze while Ego introduced himself to her. The scene went back to Ego saying this remote attack had been a little easier. SEO called his attention but seemed somewhat suspicious. She pointed at Stardust and asked why she was sitting on the ground. Ego screamed, asking what she was doing, until Stardust touched the communicator. Kim paid close attention to that detail. Then he told Seo to hurry and connect to the earpiece Stardust was wearing, and right after Seo tried to do that as fast as possible, until we returned to the moment he introduced himself. She called him garbage, but he answered it was no big deal, and said he was just curious and asked what she was doing sitting there instead of saving people. She looked at the plane, saying it was his fault the plane was falling, and screamed at him, asking if that was his plan, to lead her to her death. Ego cut in, saying she could do it, and told her to fly to the sky and save those people because this was her. Stardust froze at his words and then asked herself what that bastard was saying. He asked her why he would try to kill her. Without Stardust, he was just another ordinary villain. Finally, he laughed, saying she completed him. Her eyes started to shine. Then, she started getting up and removed the earpiece, saying even if it was a trick of his, she would let herself be fooled this time. Right after, she broke the earpiece. Then, she started bracing to fly. The momentum she was building started cracking the ground, and in the blink of an eye, she flew at high speed. She stood face to face with the plane and told herself she knew she would live with the weight of guilt if she did not do something, until she remembered Ego saying she could do it, and also what he had said, "This is you." Then, she collided head-on with the plane to hold it. Meanwhile, Deok was crying because he had lost the quiz. He thought about his family, looked at his own hand with eyes full of tears, and closed them, starting to cry even more, until a girl looked out the window. The speed seemed to be decreasing. She started calming down while in tears. Some people were communicating with the pilot. He answered he had no idea, but the plane was being guided to the ground by an external force. Stardust was using maximum strength holding the plane. She was tense. She just had to hold on a little longer. The scene cut to Deok's vision going dark. The flight attendant came close asking if he was okay, and his head was spinning, until he looked around, asking himself where he was. Sometime later, the two of them got off the plane. He looked around confused and started asking what this was. Stardust was on her knees looking at the sky, until Deok noticed something. He started crying because she had protected them. That was the hero. She looked at the sky full of tears, saying Ego's name. Sometime later, in the newspapers, Stardust was named Korea's award-winning hero. The Wide News program started its broadcast. He explained that yesterday afternoon the villain Ego had remotely crashed a plane, but miraculously all the passengers were rescued safely. The one who had held the falling plane was none other than Stardust, until someone turned off the television and finished drinking their glass of water. Then Stardust fixed her hair. She turned, seeing her phone ringing, and decided to answer. She looked at the window, asking if what she heard was serious. The girl answered yes. She had asked the president to give Shin some vacation days and called her to come where she was to see the sea and relax. Stardust answered excitedly that she would go tomorrow. After that, she went to the balcony. She thought for a little while and remembered what Ego had said. "You can do it because this is you." And then, she asked herself if anyone had believed in her like that, and of all people, a random villain. But she suddenly lifted her head, and thinking about it, asked herself why he had told her to save the plane, and he was certain she would save it. Why on earth had he crashed it? Until she felt flustered, remembering Ego saying she completed him. Somehow she was certain that guy had set all of this up with some intention. She stopped for a moment, saying she needed to investigate his actions now, until she saw a call from the Heroes Association. Then she answered, but it was inaudible. Shin asked, saying, "A power reassessment?" The scene cut to Seo excited because the day had finally come. She jumped with joy holding her floaties. Kim analyzed carefully, since these were his first vacation days since arriving in this world. Then, he looked excitedly, asking himself if he should enjoy this. Sometime later, the traffic was massive. The three of them were melting because the air conditioning had broken. Seo asked if he could not just teleport the whole car, and he answered that if he did that, he would die instantly. Then she screamed, saying they could have just taken the train until she opened a box, asking what that was. She saw a weapon with ammunition in the box. Then, Ego explained, saying they never knew what might happen. Suddenly, she screamed at Ego, asking what kind of trip this was. He apologized, telling her to put the weapon down. After quite a long time, they had finally arrived at the beach. Seo ran excitedly straight into the water. Lee opened a soda meanwhile and offered it to our villain. Then the two of them stood looking at each other, and while he was drinking, she answered she would always be grateful to him, and he asked why. She answered it was for everything, and thanked him for having saved her at the beginning, and for treating her well. Ego thanked her, saying it was nothing, and she also had great cooking. Then, she got flustered and thanked him. Kim swallowed hard, asking himself if this vibe was a betrayal against him, and wondered if there was nothing in the drink. The scene shifted to the Heroes Association. The analyst explained there was nothing wrong with the test and confirmed it was impossible to stop the plane. Stardust stood still in front of the device, saying the test was not wrong. She remembered it had seemed almost impossible to stop that disaster. Suddenly, she started concentrating her energy. The analysts were startled. She loaded up her full punch and struck, causing a massive impact. The device started coming loose from the ground. The impact caused a massive shockwave throughout the facility. Everyone had their mouths open. Stardust stood still, saying she had gotten stronger. She then thanked him for what he said, which left the protagonist wondering if she wanted to kill or betray him. While the sun shone brightly, the white-haired girl noticed the mood. She asked if they were really going to just stand there dating and ignoring her. This left the brunette completely embarrassed. And our protagonist, with his head in the clouds, did not understand anything at all. Meanwhile, the white-haired girl said that if they went on a family trip, they had to play. He then agreed, saying that was true, and right after, caught her by surprise. She was startled, asking what he was going to do. He answered he was just continuing the game and threw her into the water. This made her angry because water got in her nose. But the protagonist ignored it, wondering if this was okay since he had not had a moment of peace in a long time. He thought to himself how good that was while he started playing in the water. Some time passed, and now at night, someone screamed and asked where they would attack. The henchman answered respectfully that it was at a hotel in Busan. Their leader was then satisfied with that. The scene cut to the hotel, where the protagonist group was making a reservation. The receptionist handed him the key to a room, which left him confused. The white-haired girl said it was to save money, and mentioned the bed was a super king size, so they could sleep together. This made our protagonist suspicious, but the brunette said it would be nice for the three of them to sleep together again. The protagonist questioned why they had never done that before, and thought to himself that everything would be fine because nothing bad should happen. And in the room, nothing really happened. Until a voice echoed in the background doing a countdown, immediately breaking down the door, and right after being knocked out with one move. The protagonist wondered where they had come from and went to check. He saw that the hotel was being attacked and immediately got angry because both times he went on vacation, something happened. He asked himself why they were attacking at night, since it was the hero Shadow Walker's shift. But right after, he saw the news that the hero had been found unconscious. Before he could process that, the white-haired girl appeared, asking what had happened and if it was an attack. The protagonist confirmed it and teleported, saying he was going to the parking lot and she should wake the brunette up and wait in the room. Now hidden, the protagonist analyzed the situation and thought it would be difficult to get out of there without anyone seeing. He grabbed a mask with a malicious smile, thinking he had brought it as a precaution, but it would be very useful. He teleported back to the room, tossing 2 earpieces to his companions and saying it was time for action. This made the white-haired girl say he was more excited than normal. The scene cut to the reception desk, where the Class A villain Monkey Spinner was giving a speech, demanding a ransom in exchange for the hostages. Before he could say the account number, the protagonist entered the chaos, clapping his hands and saying that attack ended right there. He grabbed all the weapons with telekinesis and executed all the kidnappers. Right after, he dodged the villain's attack, saying that was pathetic, and asking if they had really executed an attack with only that scum. The villain went furious and immediately fired a shot at the protagonist. The old man tenses up, completely frozen. Ego asks him if that's really all he's got. He's sweating heavily. Internally, he knows moving right now would be a serious problem. Meanwhile, his instincts are screaming at him to run. He just wants to strike and get out fast while the Shadow Walker is away. Then he flinches, wondering if he's on Ego's hit list of villains to eliminate. Ego tells him he looks pretty tense and offers to give him a chance to run. The old man gets angry, demanding to know what he's planning. Egostic answers that he's not planning anything. The old man's the one who ruined his vacation, but internally he's begging the guy to hurry up, since he's so dizzy he can barely keep his eyes open. Meanwhile, the old man tells himself this is his chance. If he can gather his strength, he can still turn this around. Suddenly he bolts at full speed straight for the door, shouting that he'll be the king of Korea. And in an instant, all he can see is Stardust's fist coming straight at him. He goes flying away from the door, slamming into the wall with a massive impact. Stardust reveals herself, saying they're surrounded, and orders them to surrender, but everyone's already down on the ground. Then suddenly cold footsteps approach. It's Icicle, the Class A heroine, asking if they're all dead. Shadow Walker appears right behind her, saying these guys were annoying. Turns out they were just spreading fake news. Then he asks who's the one sitting over there. Ego's jaw drops, wondering why they're leaving already. Stardust asks who he is, and if he took down all these men himself. Egostic is nursing his wound. Thankfully, they don't seem to realize he's Ego. He just needs to recover enough energy to teleport twice. Suddenly, Sei and Lee hear Kim putting on a strange voice. He answers that he's an S-class hero who operates in secret. The three of them are impressed and confused at the same time. Icicle shouts that she's never seen any record of an S-class hero in the association's database. Then she hears him ask if she doesn't understand what operating in secret means. He addresses the Class A heroine Icicle and Class A hero Shadow Walker directly, saying he's a hero who's been active since before their generation. Sei gets nervous, asking what day it even is. Ego keeps going, saying when they meet a veteran, they should greet him first, calling them disrespectful brats. Stardust stares at him, trying to make sense of the situation. Ego says it seems they don't understand anything, so he has no choice but to introduce himself properly. He tells them to listen closely, because he is the hero. Suddenly, his eyes land on a kid's shirt nearby. It reads, Apple Mango, and he immediately answers that he is Apple Mango. The bystanders present don't seem to buy the story at all. Icicle relays over the radio that he claims his name is Apple Mango. Then she calls Ego out, saying there's no hero registered under that name and demands to know his real identity. Ego shouts, calling them insolent brats, saying he even knows the name of their association president. They're all stunned by that piece of information. Ego thinks to himself that he never imagined trivial background info from the original story would come in handy. Like this. Icicle stammers nervously, saying the president himself said he's never heard of this guy. Suddenly, one of the bystanders runs up shouting that this masked guy just took down all the bad guys. Does his identity even matter that much? He continues, saying the way he conjured futuristic weapons out of thin air and wiped everyone out looked exactly like that Egogo guy from TV. Ego freezes completely as Stardust stares at the bystander. The man shrugs. So what? If anything, I'm relieved. Icicle sighs, saying he's definitely suspicious. Meanwhile, Ego is just trying to hold on a little longer. Then Icicle says, why don't we immobilize him and figure out his identity first? She extends her hand, freezing our villain's foot solid. Ego grits his teeth, starting to count. 3. Shadow Walker's already right behind him. 2. Stardust is already winding up, then bursts forward at full speed toward him. Ego just stands there, watching it all unfold. But suddenly, Stardust blows straight past him. Ego had already teleported over to Seo and Lee, vanishing right out from under Icicle's nose. Cut to a car. Inside, Ego and Sei. She's asking if he's okay, and all he asks in return is for her to cover the hotel's presence records. The two girls turn to him, asking what happened. Ego keeps applying pressure to the bleeding. Lee shouts that they need to get to a hospital, but Ego says he can't. He has no energy left to teleport. Lee grits her teeth, then orders Seo to grab the first aid kit and just handle the basics. Seo is in tears, confused. Lee turns and tells her to hurry. She wipes her tears, then Lee tells them to get out of there first as the car speeds off. Back at the hotel, the guards are already ushering the civilians to safety. Icicle is a little annoyed. Of all the rare vacation days, villains couldn't even give her one day off. Shadow Walker tells her he's heading in to rest first, and she apologizes, saying she'd only invited him out for some fresh air. She turns to Stardust, saying she'd come along anyway, but she looked a little down, eyes lowered. Meanwhile, on the road, inside an unknown car, a citizen is nodding off, wondering if he should chew some gum. Then he glances at another car in his rearview mirror. He gets furious when it overtakes him, wondering if the driver's some kind of maniac. Without a second thought, he floors it. Meanwhile, Lee is driving. Ego is breathing hard, his wound wrapped tightly with a bandage. Stardust says firmly that she needs to investigate his actions. The scene shifts to a stack of Stardust-related books, someone saying, one villain after another, then to a room full of Stardust memorabilia. He's tormented her in every way imaginable. Suddenly, someone closes the book. It's Kim, 19 years old in his past life. He says this manhwa really hit rock bottom, tosses it on the floor, and starts muttering to himself, finally saying Stardust's name. Then he starts drifting off to sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. A glow appears in the sky through his window as he sleeps. Back at the base, Sei watches him, sitting quietly. She looks a little sad, worried. She tells Lee she doesn't want to eat, but Lee insists, saying Kim will wake up soon. Meanwhile, our villain remains lying in the capsule. Lee tries to calm Seo down as she cries, feeding her some food. Suddenly, Ego stirs, saying the food is going down her throat just fine while her brother is dying right here. Seo and Lee both jump. She starts crying even harder. Kim climbs out of the capsule, and Seo starts hitting him for the scare he gave her. Cut to an apartment at night. Inside, a photo of Ego holding a different mask. The news reports that Egostic's attack had no casualties, questioning whether it can even be called an attack. Shin is watching this on her computer. She recalls that the plane attack didn't have any casualties either. Then she remembers his words, "You can do it, because it's you." She notes he sounded so certain she'd succeed, almost like he already knew her abilities would grow stronger. Shin laughs quietly, wondering how he could have known. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But then she admits it's an undeniable fact that she has gotten stronger. She looks over more suspicious evidence. The villain Ego killed. The article said he had powers capable of causing large-scale disasters in the future, and whoever was watching him closely was egostic. She tells herself she has a gut feeling he's working towards some larger plan, then wonders what the goal behind his attacks even is. She notes that Egostic knew the association president's real name. Shin wonders if he's a former S-class hero who clashed with the association and turned into a villain. Cut to Seo saying the theory that Ego has some conflict with the Hero Association is gaining traction. Lee tries to calm things down, taking Seo's phone away, saying Kim must be exhausted. But Seo turns, asking what he's going to do. Just keep using "I can't stop, I'm a villain" as an excuse forever. Ego stammers nervously. Then he stares at the two of them and answers that he's going to rest for 3 months. They both get excited, asking if he's serious. Ego confirms he's going to disappear off the map completely, and public interest will naturally fade once he vanishes. But he admits to himself that even during his break, he feels an urgent need to recruit a new member, the only healer from the original story. And if he leaves her alone, she'll eventually become a villain who throws the whole balance of the world out of whack. 3 months later, at a cafe, Shin gets a message that a villain has appeared and immediately asks if it's Ego. They tell her it isn't. She flies toward the scene anyway, wondering what he'd been up to for the past 3 months. Cut to Seo's house. Kim is thrilled watching Stardust arrive at the villain's location on screen. Seo looks bored watching him get so excited. The villain is a Class A named Rockbottom, calling out to Stardust, but she interrupts by pressing her hand into his face. She throws him to the ground, shouting that he is not the real Egostic. The villain transforms back to normal, collapsing. Ego cheers, thanking her for making him stronger, while Seo wonders if this is really that entertaining. Then she slaps Kim, telling him they need to get to work. She can't stand watching him go in and out of Stardust's fan club every single day. Ego turns to her, asking what she's talking about. Sei asks if he really thinks she doesn't know. She is a hacker after all. Kim chokes on his popcorn, stands up, and says it's just a small hobby. He gets up, checks the calendar. SEO asks what's happening today. An attack, maybe? He says no. She asks if it's eliminating a villain. He says no again, then says they're recruiting a new member. Cut to a couple admiring the view. While the man is talking, someone suddenly bumps into him. The girl apologizes, and he says it's fine. She walks off, with his wallet in her hands. Then she notices something. Several men waiting at the bottom of the stairs she was about to descend. They're clearly waiting for something. The girl grits her teeth. Suddenly a boy comes running toward her. His name is Jan. She wipes his face and asks if he had fun. He says yes. Then she notices his scraped knee, asks where he got hurt. He says he fell on the way. She extends her hand and heals the boy. Jan is amazed. His knee heals in seconds. The girl takes off her hat, hands it to him, telling him to go home. That's Pikachu. Her future villain name will be Saint X. Sometime later, she arrives home, opens the door, calling out to Jan that she bought something, but suddenly hears a voice say, "I knew it, you little brat!" It's the Reservoir Gang. Toxin. Besides pickpocketing on their territory, he'd warned her that if she hid anything from him, like the wallet scattered on the floor, he'd kill her. Pikachu screams at him to let Jan go. He can take everything and just disappear. He sighs, calling her a bitch, turns and grabs the boy's hair, gets his attention, tells Jan to look at his sister, saying she clearly doesn't know her place, then points a knife saying, "Today he's going to teach her a lesson." Pikachu screams desperately that it was her fault. The man says it's too late now and readies his blade, but suddenly the knife flies out of his hand. He slowly starts to turn around, then gets slammed into a cabinet. Several weapons hover in the air, aimed at every single criminal in the room. Jan takes the chance while they all scramble to escape, hugs his sister. Ego thinks to himself, originally on Friday the 17th, her brother would have died at the hands of this gang, and she would have been consumed by hatred, walking the path of a villain. If he'd showed up just a little later, this would have gone badly. Pikachu starts to turn, stands in front of her brother, asking if he's Egostic. Ego says it's a pleasure to meet them, and that he's here to take them with him. Pikachu shouts, asking why them specifically, since he's also a cruel villain. Egostic answers that he's here to save them, but it'd be a problem if the police showed up. She shouts that she'd rather die, demanding what he wants, but suddenly she looks at her brother. Jan is running straight toward Ego, grabs his hand, says he's part of his fan club. Ego gets flustered receiving the compliment. The scene shifts to moments later. Egostic introduces the siblings to Lee and Sei. Pikachu introduces herself and her brother. Sei studies her, noting she has healing powers. wondering if she's a woman. Then Ego prepares mango juice for the two of them. Sei keeps analyzing. She reminds her of herself when she first met Kim. Pikachu is quite suspicious of the whole place. Meanwhile, Ego is quenching his thirst with mango juice. Suddenly, Sei shouts that she told him not to drink straight from the bottle. That's her bottle. His is in the fridge. Lee asks Jan if he wants some fruit. Jan grabs the first piece. Pikachu, still suspicious, tries to catch his attention. He pops the fruit into his mouth, then turns to her, asking what's wrong. She says it's nothing. Ego turns, telling Seo he's about to have a serious conversation with them and excuses himself. Seo mocks him as he shouts at her to go. Sometime later, it's just the three of them talking. He asks Pikachu if she killed the orphanage director and ran. She looks at him, still suspicious. He continues, saying he investigated that director who've been mistreating them constantly, and that finding them wasn't an accident. He came with a purpose. She's startled, asking what purpose that was, then jumps when Ego says it was so they could live happily here. Kim breaks into a genuine smile, but of course he'd forgotten. They wouldn't actually be living underground. He'd installed a teleportation portal, and soon they'd be moving to the big house. Pikachu shouts, asking why he's even doing this for them. He answers that he has a sister around their age, and that's why he's doing this. Jan is thrilled, listing off all of Ego's attacks over and over again. Pikachu tries to get his attention again, but Ego says it'll be fun if she tries living with them. They're not as bad as she thinks. The two of them just stare at him. Then he tells them to come this way. A door to a room opens, leading directly to a portal. Ego is the first to step through. Pikachu is hesitant, unsure whether to follow, but suddenly Jan jumps into the portal, saying he'll go first. She sighs, wondering if any of this is really happening. Finally, she decides to go through. Climbing the stairs on the other side, she's stunned. The view from up there is beautiful, and Ego asks if she likes it, adds that this is where they'll be living. He stays on the 3rd floor, and they can have the 2 rooms on the 2nd. Tells her not to worry about rent, since this is a time she needs to focus on learning. And finally, if she has any doubts, she should stay a few days and think it over. Pikachu looks a little confused, staring at him, then turns to Jan. She remembers the gang that had cornered him, and the moment he was about to be attacked, crying. But right now, he's happy, having fun. She lowers her head and agrees, still a little wary, then thanks Kim. He turns, celebrating. The healer has been successfully recruited. Cut to Shin's apartment. On the Hero Forum, comments are asking if Ego is dead. Shin sits at her computer, wondering where he is and what he's even doing. She bites her nails, repeating his name. Egostic. Cut to a laboratory. One of the scientists says it's astonishing every time he looks at it. The other says that by the time Sunwoo is released, they'll have completed the project and present him with the finished behemoth. And when that happens, all of Korea, no, the entire world will bow before the Heian group. They celebrate, saying no one will be able to stop them. Back at Ego's new house, Pikachu is chopping mushrooms. Lee tells her she can rest, but Pikachu says she's more comfortable this way. Lee thanks her. She stays quiet, looking down. She thinks to himself, calling Lee Ego's beautiful terrorist. And now, 4 months after the incident, this is her life. Living well, happy enough that the dark rumors about what might have happened to her have completely blown over. Suddenly, she hears Ego shouting. She looks at him holding Sei, whispering to herself Egostic's true identity. Kim. Ego asks Sei why she still sleeps underground, and she answers that he'd once mentioned something about the base, but Kim cuts her off. He's already excited over the food, while Pikachu thinks to herself, if he ever showed up hurt or something one day, her healing power. She clenches her fist. Cut to Kim staring at the calendar, saying it's time. Time to prepare for the black disaster created by the Heian group. He keeps staring at the calendar. Suddenly, someone kicks the door open, shouting, "There he is!" Sei shouts furiously, demanding they launch an attack. Then she's stunned. Kim agrees without any resistance at all. He stands up, cracking his neck, then announces, "Squad Ego, meeting time!" There are about 4 of them in the meeting room. Pikachu looks a little confused. She asks everyone why exactly they carry out terrorist attacks. Ego prepares to explain the reasoning behind the terror. Sei cuts him off, telling him to get to the point. So he tells Pikachu that actually they're villains. She understands, but still looks a bit confused. CO adds that there can never be any civilian casualties. They needed to involve that infuriating Stardust, and the attack somehow had to benefit her. Ego thanks her for the beautiful summary, then starts explaining this attack's concept. The famous, "Has the Soul Bridge already fallen?" He explains that at this exact point in the city, a giant monster will appear this winter. It'll head north, sweeping across the entire Korean peninsula. But if they take down the bridge during the attack, it'll fall into the water. And since water is its weakness, it'll die. Seo says out loud, wondering where the hell he gets this information. He just answers that it's his secret. Then she gets excited, since this time it doesn't even seem to be about Stardust. She asks Kim if the concept's already decided, and he asks in return, what do they have plenty of? She answers, time. He laughs and says, actually, it's money. Sometime later, Ego is live streaming with everyone celebrating his return. He's standing in front of the bridge they're planning to attack. Ego greets everyone, saying the #1 most influential villain, selected by the Korean association, known as Egostic, is back, and asks if they already know what he's about to do. Then answers, of course, a bomb attack. Suddenly, a driver is heard screaming in panic. Ego orders everyone on the bridge to stay put, points the detonator forward and presses it. In the blink of an eye, the bridge explodes. He points at the cars still stuck there, saying the guests invited to play the game have already been contacted. Then explains, the participants are everyone in the country currently watching. The method is simple. Send your account number to the link in the description, and he'll give you 100,000 won immediately. But by 7 p.m. tonight, if more than 500,000 people claim the money, this bridge will be blown up. Of course, along with the people still stranded on it. Then he shouts, telling them to choose free money or the bridge that is about to explode. And well, the people's choice begins now. He remembers Stardust and decides to let her know she doesn't need to show up today. Then he starts stretching, thinks to himself that she must be relieved a crazy villain won't be bothering her. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, someone appears at incredible speed. It's Stardust heading straight for him. He's so startled he almost drops his recording device, says to himself, been a while? Stardust. But she just stares at him without any reaction at all. Ego gets flustered standing in front of her. Only then does he start getting nervous. Our villain keeps staring back at her. She stares at him so intensely, it feels like she's trying to devour him with her eyes. Cut to a man getting his boss's attention. He shows him that if he sends his account number, they'll get 100,000 won for free. The boss reads through it, reaching the part where if more than 500,000 people claim it, the bridge will explode. The man says it looks like some kind of attack on the bridge, and his boss mocks him, asking who would even take money like this. He answers that he already claimed the 100,000 won. The boss loses it, saying he shouldn't have done that. The man apologizes. Then the boss pulls out his phone, admitting he claimed it the second the news broke. Cut to a mother talking to her son on the phone, and he's asking for her account number. She looks at her phone, wondering what have gotten into him, and where this sudden allowance is coming from. Then she sees it's true. The 100,000 has already been deposited. Meanwhile, at the bridge where the attack is unfolding, Ego had no idea it would be this cold out, and there was something else bothering him too. The stairs were heavy, especially Stardust's. He wonders why she's glaring at him like that, or if there's some memory tied to this bridge. The thought that she's this upset with him actually makes him feel a little bad. Ego tells himself there's no other way. It's all for her, Stardust. The Black Disaster. This incident is the first depressive event to appear in the original story. He decides to check the counter. Already past 450,000 people, with 3 hours still left. He teleports onto the bridge, saying the people of this world are way too selfish. Then he realizes he's going to win this either way, even if he does nothing. He addresses the live stream, telling the citizens he doesn't think they'll actually claim the 100,000. Ego approaches a car, taps the window, asking their guests to come out. As the window rolls down, he thinks to himself that from here on out, it's out of his control. He looks at the man and asks him to introduce himself. The man introduces himself as Choi. Ego says it's a pleasure to meet him, even in a life-threatening situation. Suddenly, he starts laughing. Ego is completely thrown off. Choi laughs, saying if people don't take the money, the bridge, and them will be fine. The comments are dying laughing. Egostic asks if he has any last words. From a distance, Stardust hears Choi wishing strength for Korea, saying he believes in everyone. She wonders what Egostic is planning. Meanwhile, he's searching for someone whose reaction might be a little more normal. He taps on the next window. Suddenly, a ridiculous amount of noise erupts from inside the car. Everyone's ecstatic, saying they're huge fans. Ego is already getting dizzy from all this input. He decides to hurry up and wrap the interview here. Suddenly, a girl grabs him, asking for an autograph before he leaves. Ego doesn't have much choice and starts signing autographs. Just as he's about to walk away, a car full of people shouts that they each claimed 100,000 won. Sometime later, he tells Seo to turn on the screens. Drones fly over the water, their lights activate. Ego addresses everyone again, saying the promised 7 p.m. deadline has arrived. Now it's time to see the results. Ego turns, asking for the panel to display the results. The comments are already buzzing with excitement. The panel starts calculating. Then Ego announces 250,000 people claimed the 100,000 won. The citizens stuck on the bridge listen as he calls the people of Korea incredible. Then he snaps his fingers, telling them to enjoy the final fireworks show, made especially for them, the selfish ones. Suddenly, the bridge starts exploding. Stardust loses her mind with rage. Ego says his goodbyes, saying that's it for him, for now. He admits he've genuinely reached his limit, and that now he'll just watch Stardust save the day and then cut to Stardust flying. She's speeding toward a car falling off the bridge. She's just barely not going to make it. Ego watches, realizing she won't catch it in time, so he uses his telekinesis. Stardust reaches for the car. Both of them scream, straining with everything they've got until she finally catches it, flies off to pull the other cars to safety. Ego feels relieved, but he's gasping for breath from the shock. Suddenly, his vision blurs. He passes out and starts falling straight toward the water. Then he vanishes in an instant. Ego managed to teleport back to his base. SEO and Lee are already running to save him. He lies on the floor, exhausted. Sometime later, the two of them are terrified. CO touches the capsule, begging him to open his eyes. Meanwhile, Pikachu listens from outside the door. Kim remains with his eyes closed. Pikachu stays frozen, back to the door. Then she swallows her tears, wipes them away. Cut to Shin watching the city. She looks at the sky, thinking about Ego, then looks at the newspaper showing the message he'd once left her, the day he sent her a warning, the motivational speech at the observatory, the dating rumors between the two of them, and finally, the attack at the ice cream festival. She stares at the pile of papers, remembers him telling her never to think about revealing her face or appearing in public. Shin looks at the latest headline, admitting that if he hadn't given her that courage back then, she never would have acted. Stardust realizes his voice back then had carried a certainty, as if he'd known everything about her all along. The memory of Ego motivating her surfaces in her mind. She admits that even after all this time, even after everything he've done, even after his own attack, she has a mountain of questions. Are you really a villain? Are you really a bad person? And finally, who is he really? Shin touches her chest, saying that because of this strange feeling, she couldn't say a single word. And in the moment she'd flown toward the falling car, Stardust had strained with everything she had, begging herself to reach it, but her willpower alone didn't seem to be enough. Then suddenly, the car stopped falling. She noticed its speed slowing. Stardust turned immediately and saw Ego straining to hold the car up. By the time she'd finished rescuing everyone, all that remained was smoke rising from the bridge. She couldn't find him anywhere. In that moment, Stardust grew worried. The scene returns to her crumpling the newspaper, saying that at this point, Agostic really is. But someone interrupts, asking why she's sitting alone being so dramatic. It's Icicle, calling her adorable and offering her a soda. Stardust brightens up, thanking her for coming. Icicle hugs her, saying of course she'd come. Shin calms down at those words. The two of them toast. Icicle downs her soda in one go, then celebrates, saying it's nice to enjoy the night view and some everyday peace. Then she notices something off. She asks Stardust if it's about Egostic again, and Shin confirms it is. Icicle tells her to just forget him. Looking at his last attack, it barely even seems like he's trying to bother her anymore. Stardust suddenly asks if she wants to hear something, then tells her she thinks Ego might not be a bad person after all. Cut to someone stepping out of the portal. Pikachu sees Seo on the floor. She looks pretty rough, shaken by Ego's condition. She looks at the door again, decides to go inside. She looks at Ego inside the capsule. Pikachu wonders if she's doing the right thing. Even if he seems like a good person now, he could still change, like all those people who covet her power. She looks at Ego, wondering what she should do. She tells herself he saved her without knowing anything about her, and treated them well without asking for anything in return, and now he's dying right in front of her. She touches the capsule, remembering Jan saying Uncle Ego was cool, apologizes, admitting she hadn't had the courage. She states firmly, Uncle really is a good person, but if he ever finds out about her power and starts acting like those other people, Pikachu wipes the tears from her face, then pulls her hand back from the capsule, extends it again, saying she'll be brave. She starts healing Ego's wounds. The bandage starts to clean itself, and now he's breathing normally. After that, she decides to leave. She stands at the door and thanks him, then leaves Kim alone. Our villain says to himself that she's now been successfully recruited. Finally, he gets up and starts stretching. Ego laughs, thanking her. Cut to a table full of sodas. Shin says it's strange that Ego's attacks never have any casualties, and even the fact that he saved the falling car this time. Icicle laughs, coming closer and asking if she's actually buying into the conspiracy theory that he's a secret S-class hero. Shin turns, saying it's not about believing or not, and Icicle says she was just joking. Stardust turns, hearing her say something feels off, just like she said. Icicle argues that he still does bad things, even if there are no casualties, and that only applies to civilians. Shin agrees. Then Icicle asks what the real issue is, and tells her to just think of him as that kind of villain. Stardust thinks to herself that she believes he's working towards some bigger goal. Icicle cuts in, asking if she found any interesting guys lately, and Shin asks in return how a superhero is even supposed to meet someone. She apologizes apologizes, saying her family is extremely strict about her personal life. Shin tells her she's really cute when she gets flustered. Cut to another location. Some guards are waiting for someone to pass through the gate. That's Sunwoo, S-class villain and technical advisor for the Haeun group. The scientist compliments him, but Sunwoo ignores it and asks about progress. He answers that they're currently at 95%, going smoothly. Completion is expected around September next year. Sunwoo cuts him off, saying that's far too slow. Preparations need to be finished by the end of winter. The scientist swallows his words, staring at him. Sunwoo gets into the car, says to himself, "Cuckoo, just wait." Before winter's end, this entire Republic of Korea will be under Dr. Sunwoo's feet. Cut back to Ego's house. On TV, the news announces Sunwoo's release, returning as the frontline face of the Haeun group. Kim laughs, saying the player has entered the field. 3 months pass since everything happened. Yan is thrilled about the snow, while Sei chases after him. Lee sips her hot chocolate. Pikachu and Lee enjoy the moment, saying it's grayed out. Suddenly, Seo turns, hearing Kim tell her to pack the snow properly. He says the snow looks so pretty and neat, but suddenly he's interrupted by Seo telling him to bring it on. Yan and Seo get pelted with snowballs. Ego says the rookies can try, and unleashes his special move, the Ego Blast. Seo turns to see Yan surrendering. Then she looks at Kim, asking if she's ready. Suddenly, Yan and Ego burst out laughing at Seo, buried in snow. Afterward, they all wait for some cookies to eat. The two of them are happy, savoring the taste of victory. Just before Ego takes a bite of his cookie, he notices something approaching. Seo hits him square in the head with a snowball. Ego collapses, a bump forming on his head while Seo wonders if she threw it too hard. She rushes over to Kim, worried. Meanwhile, Pikachu watches, starting to laugh. Suddenly he gets up, mocking her expression. Seo starts blushing with embarrassment and anger. And that's how they spent the last 3 months of winter, just resting. Ego even considered launching another attack, but Stardust was already strong enough on her own. One thing that did change, Pikachu's expression grew brighter, and she finally started opening up a little. The blame for the Seoul Bridge collapse fell entirely on Agostic, and the criticism poured in. And the 1.2 million people who claimed the money ended up dumping their own moral responsibility onto Ego. Either way, Kim states that now, it's just a matter of waiting for the black disaster. Suddenly, Sei jumps on Ego's back. She celebrates her victory, declaring she've won, but suddenly she gets buried in snow again, this time by Yan. Lee laughs at the whole scene while Pikachu tells them to be careful. Finally, they all head back to the table to join together. Cut to a red alarm blaring. The laboratory is falling apart. Sunwoo is panicking, wondering where it all went wrong. One of the scientists warns him they need to evacuate, but Sunwoo says he can't leave his life's research behind. Then he turns and spots the monster, covered in eyes. The scientists drag him away as he wonders how his prototype gained its own consciousness. Cut to the Hero Association building. Everyone's in a frenzy. Suddenly an explosion. Stardust rushes toward the president. She arrives asking what's happening, and Park answers it's an emergency. He wonders where this terrifying monster even came from. Stardust freezes completely. Meanwhile, the monster wreaks havoc across the city. Suddenly, a chunk of a building falls onto a car, blowing it up. The man screams, worried about his car, while another asks if the car is really the biggest problem right now. The monster suddenly charges into another building, leaps straight inside. Another citizen holds his child in his arms. The monster roars, causing a massive commotion throughout the city. Stardust says she's heading there immediately, while Park fails to calm her down. He asks how she's going to handle it, and she shouts that she'll figure something out. Meanwhile, he can just eat popcorn and watch. Then she hears something on the panel. The monster leaps into the water where the broken bridge is and starts sinking. Park and Stardust both freeze. Then he gets her attention, asking for a full report on what happened tomorrow. Meanwhile, our beloved villain is eating popcorn, and Squad Ego celebrates their victory. Cut to Shin's apartment. She's back at her computer. There's a poll asking if people still think Agostic is a villain. The forum says Ego prevented the disaster by simply letting the monster fall into the water. As Shin eats, she realizes that's exactly how it happened. She admits that if Ego hadn't actually destroyed the bridge, there wouldn't have been any superhuman capable of stopping that monster. Suddenly, she gets up to go for a run, saying that can't be it. After all, he's the villain, and she's the hero. Even if he protects her, it's supposed to be her protecting others. The next morning, the news announces the cause of the black disaster at the Haeun Group's headquarters. Currently, there are no signs of survivors on site, and Dr. Sunwoo has vanished along with his entire research team. Kim watches how it all ended for the Haeun Group. Pikachu celebrates, saying that bastard got exactly what he deserved. Sei says it's not over yet. She still needs to hunt down and finish off anyone who escaped. Ego laughs, telling them not to worry. since they'll all crawl out on their own soon enough. SEO asks what he's planning this time. Suddenly, Ego pulls up the blueprint of the Heian group's underground lab. Sei loses it, asking what's down there. Kim circles floor B9, saying there's a lot of stuff there. He laughs, saying honestly, there's a lot of really cool stuff. The scene shifts to describe Behemoth, the ultimate weapon created by the Heian group through their experiments to build an army of superpowered monsters. A living being capable of blocking Shadowwalker's powers and withstanding nuclear bombs. Suddenly, Kim looks at Lee and Sei's faces. All three of them look unsure about this idea. Sei reminds him, this time, it's literally an army of monsters. Taking one or two more holes in the stomach doesn't sound fun. She shouts at Kim, asking if he has lost his mind, then starts hitting him while he explains he just wants to get stronger too. Eventually, he figures it should be fine as long as he coordinates with the Hero Association's actions. Cut to the association building. The anchor reports signs of life detected in the lab. It seems the monsters are still alive. Park is startled by a sudden call from Shadowwalker. He's on the line, saying he tried getting close last night but was blocked by strange waves the thing was emitting. Cut to Stardust receiving her instructions. She confirms she understands, and Park approves the underground exploration mission at the lab. Stardust starts descending into the hole. Suddenly, Ego teleports there too. He laughs, saying this exploration wasn't planned, so he's a little nervous. SEO says if he's scared, he could have backed out ages ago. Either way, the two girls tell him to be careful. Ego teleports in, addressing his live stream once again. He tells his viewers they must be curious, and explains that unfortunately, today isn't an attack. This location is actually the underground level of the Heian group, the very site of that terrible disaster. Cut to Park asking if Stardust can still hear him. His assistant answers that she seems to have gone so deep she've lost signal. Park slams his hand on the desk, demanding to know what Ego thinks he's doing barging in there out of nowhere, then orders his assistant to fetch some popcorn. Meanwhile, Ego walks through the lab, asking on his live stream what these shadowy figures were even doing here. Suddenly, he notices something strange. Comments warn him to be careful, and he responds that he'd never be afraid of leftover experiment remnants. Then suddenly, he hears something hidden nearby. He tenses up, readying his telekinetic weapons. But it's just a kitten lying on the floor. Ego can't believe he got startled by a cat. Still, he wonders why a cat would even be down here. Suddenly, some ribbon-like strands begin covering it. Ego watches the cat disappear. Then it reappears atop a mass of writhing tendrils. Ego slowly starts to turn around and gets startled by the creature looming right above his head. It lunges at him. Ego aims his weapons, heart nearly leaping out of his throat. Meanwhile, Stardust is walking calmly until she turns, hearing the sound of gunfire. Ego, terrified, says he should have listened to Seo. The monster advances as he flees, saying there's no point regretting it now. He grits his teeth in panic. Ego runs, saying at this point he'll just grab Behemoth and get out. But he trips, tumbles down the stairs 3 times. He turns to look at the monster. It's slowly descending the stairs, drooling. He fires his weapons. The monster screams in pain. Ego realizes it is starting to collapse. He teleports away through the smoke, then tries to catch his breath, realizing he left his camera and gun behind in all the chaos. He decides to use his communicator to call Seo, but realizes the signal doesn't reach down here and admits to himself things are getting genuinely terrifying now. Egostic feels a strange sensation. Suddenly, Stardust crashes through the wall next to him. Ego drops to his knees to shield himself. Stardust wonders what this oddly familiar feeling is. Then Ego turns, asking, "Stardust?" And Stardust doesn't miss a beat either. "Egostic?" Then she asks what he's doing here, and Ego nervously asks the same thing right back. She answers that she's a hero, and cleaning up a place like this doesn't need an explanation. Ego laughs, admitting that's fair. But Stardust cracks her knuckles, saying this is an unexpected bonus. Our villain gets a little starstruck as she says, if he surrenders quietly, it won't hurt too much. She attacks, but he teleports away. Then he's shocked, realizing she's not joking around. She keeps advancing while Ego dodges, begging her to wait a second. Stardust breaks into a genuine smile. Ego, meanwhile, is panicking, trying to explain himself until he holds up a hand for her to stop. He says he knows that in her eyes, he's nothing but a lowly villain, but Ego asks her to look around. After all, she doesn't even fully know what this place is and asks if they could call a truce until they get to the bottom of it. Stardust asks why he doesn't just reveal his real reason for being here. Shin keeps listening as he claims it of purely intellectual curiosity. She says that's fine, smiling in a suspiciously knowing way. Then she turns, saying she's been struggling with these monsters and asks for his help. Ego has no reaction, wondering what's happening. She looks at him, thinking to herself it's better to keep him close and move together. Sometime later, in another room, Stardust opens a drawer. Ego walks in through the door, glancing all around. Suddenly, she slams her hand against the wall right beside him, shouts that a villain has no business sticking his nose in here, and orders him to scram. This is confidential. Then she turns away while Ego cowers. He glances at her for a moment. Stardust is standing right in front of him. Ego laughs, saying being this close together feels nice. Sometime later, they continue walking through the facility until she finds another door. It's the power suppression chamber. Stardust turns and calls Ego over. He's startled, wondering if he's the one who has to go inside, but then he agrees, telling himself he's become a lab rat. Ego removes his hat and steps inside, tosses the hat aside. Then he collapses to the floor, realizing his telekinesis isn't working. He closes his eyes. Teleportation doesn't work either. Everything goes silent for a moment. Then he tells Stardust that, yeah, powers really don't work in here. He's genuinely impressed, wondering how this technology even works. Suddenly, Stardust punches straight through the wall. She stands with her back to him, saying nothing, then turns, saying that was just to confirm. Ego's stunned that she just punched through solid concrete with raw strength. Suddenly, an alarm starts blaring. Both of them jump, startled by the sudden sound. They watch as the door slams shut. Ego looks at her, saying they're trapped. Stardust looks back, saying they're in a sealed room with no powers. A hero and a villain. Actually, no, just an adult man and an adult woman alone. Some time passes, and Stardust is hitting the wall while Ego tells her it's pointless. He tells her to check the timer, explaining the security door should open in about 3 hours, and she'd be better off not wasting her strength. Stardust is out of breath from all her attempts. She clenches her bleeding fists. Ego doesn't even know how to react to that. He stands up, saying this is just stubbornness. Stardust looks ready to just fight him instead. But suddenly, Ego asks her for her hand. She's caught off guard as he reaches out. He finishes wrapping her hand in a bandage. Stardust looks a little awkward. She pulls her hand back, saying she's not going to thank him. He replies that it sure sounded like a thank you. She punches the wall again, and Ego says he gets it. He'll stop here. Then he sets his hat on the ground with a sigh, sits down, saying he's going to lie down for a bit. He explains there's nothing to do for 3 hours, so if she doesn't have anything better to do either, maybe she should take a nap too. Stardust stares at him once more without a word. An hour passes, and Ego still can't sleep. He tries closing his eyes, but can't relax even for a second. Ego turns, thinking that even without her powers, Stardust is stronger than a grown man, and he can't afford to let his guard down. She glances at him, a little awkwardly. Ego tries sneaking a quick glance at her, then turns back to face the wall. 2 hours later, he starts noticing the oxygen thinning. He turns to Stardust and sees her breathing look strained, but suddenly she brings up the bridge. Ego is caught off guard by her bringing it up so suddenly. She asks if it was him. The car? Was that his doing? Our villain remembers. She'd noticed that exact moment when he'd used telekinesis to help her. Stardust lifts her head, asking if he was the one who stopped the car. Ego tries to dodge the question, saying he's a villain who doesn't know how to stop and always just charges forward. Then she brings up the plane, asking why he told her to go save it. Ego is screaming internally from nerves. Suddenly, he blurts out that her existence is what completes him, and asks if it's really that strange for a villain to send a hero to go save people. The two of them just stare at each other. Ego realizes he got a little carried away out of nervousness. Then Stardust brings up the bridge's destruction, asks if he'd done all of it knowing everything in advance. Ego laughs, saying she's buying into some ridiculous internet theory. He explains that of course he was surprised too, but it was obviously just a coincidence. He looks at her, wondering what that expression means and if she's genuinely testing him. He wonders if he've overlooked something. The bridge attack, the plane crash and the quiz, the black disaster, that monster. He gets nervous, realizing she's starting to doubt whether he's really a villain at all. Ego covers his face, thinking that if he tries to explain himself clumsily now, it'll only raise more suspicion. Stardust looks confused, staring at him. Then suddenly he bursts out laughing uncontrollably, claiming he did it all because he knew the monster was coming. Stardust keeps staring at him as Ego calls it a secret technique. She studies him even more closely. Then he laughs, asking what you're going to do about it. Stardust asks how he knew, and he explains it's thanks to hacking, says he messes around with Korea's computer networks. Stardust looks at him, saying it's still strange, asks why he prevents civilian casualties. Ego tries to explain that he just doesn't like losing his audience. He stammers, asking what any of this has to do with anything else. Stardust turns away without a word. Ego points at her, asking if she understood. Then suddenly she stands up. Our villain is left confused, staring at her. Stardust stands face to face with him. She stares at him once more. Ego stays confused, still looking at her. Then Ego hears her telling him to get out of the way. He glances at the timer. 1 second left. Finally, after all this time, the door opens. Stardust kneels down and picks up a rock, stands up and crushes it to test her powers. Ego tests his telekinesis too before heading out. They start walking toward another room. Right in front of Ego, a panel beeps. It reads a provisional name, Teleporter, Mantis model, with a habit of attacking from the rear. Then Stardust and Ego both look up. There it is, the prototype Zero Behemoth capsule. He turns, saying this concludes their exploration of this tunnel. But suddenly he stops, telling Stardust that if this is a prototype, there must be a main body somewhere. He turns and asks why they aren't heading that way. She says no, telling him they're going the other direction. Eventually they reach the spot. She checks the panel and notices something. Ego wonders to himself where she's even going. Up until now, he'd been working so hard to seem like a pure-blooded villain, yet she'd turned her back on him so easily. He laughs, saying words alone aren't going to be enough. Suddenly, Stardust turns around, and Ego is already charging up some kind of attack. Stardust shouts, asking what he's doing. Ego answers, betrayal. Shin gets furious, readying her fists. Ego tells himself that in the original story, there was a scene where Dr. Sunwoo used Behemoth to fight Stardust, which means right now, he's going to give her a beating. Ego charges the attack instantly, extends it toward her, expanding the size of his hand. His hand grows 10 times its normal size. Stardust has no reaction time. Ego starts laughing with excitement. Shin lands a hit, but he blocks it with his arm. The impact causes an explosion throughout the lab. They end up face to face again. Ego laughs, asking if she's really going to destroy everything. Stardust braces against the impact of his blow, shouts that he doesn't fight fair. Then she charges at him with everything she's got. They collide, causing a massive impact. Ego asks if she saw that. This is what a villain does. Stardust grits her teeth, glaring at him. Egostic spots a creature behind her, the perfect opening to teleport with her. The creature is right behind her. It lunges, about to strike Stardust, but suddenly Ego teleports, pushing her out of the way. Stardust watches as Ego takes the hit instead. He absorbs the impact and starts bleeding. She turns, asking what that was. Ego turns to her, saying she owes him one, then starts teleporting away. Meanwhile, Lee is worried and Sei is bored since Kim is taking so long. Suddenly, she notices he've arrived. She runs excitedly to the entrance, saying he took forever. Then she freezes in shock. Pikachu and Lee hear Sei scream from a distance. They rush toward her. Sei is on her knees, staring at their villain. Ego is bleeding from his chest. Lee is panicking while Sei tries to wake him up. Kim is gasping for breath. Pikachu tells Sei to move out of the way. Sei looks at her through tears. Then Pikachu starts healing Kim. She touches his abdomen to close the wounds. The whole room begins to glow. Meanwhile, Stardust stares at how much blood Ego had lost, and finally wonders why he saved her and who he really is. Cut to Kim getting Lee's attention. He begs her to let him eat by himself. Then he bites down on the spoon with Lee, saying he's got the hang of it. Pikachu and Yan are already on their way out. She apologizes for hiding her abilities, and they still let her go back to school. Ego says that's nonsense. All he can do is thank her, and wishes her a great first day back. Then everyone says their goodbyes to Yan and Pikachu. Right after, Sei dares him to try running off somewhere again. She asks what he brought home. It looks pretty heavy. Ego says it's for massages, and asks if he can show her. Suddenly, he uses telekinesis to pull the object toward him. Then he wakes up Behemoth. Lee and Sei are both confused. Suddenly, Ego's restraints snap open. They both stare in horror at the massive creature. But it was just Kim using the ability to make Sei regret ever handcuffing him. Cut to Shin's apartment at night. She is lying in bed. Suddenly, she remembers Ego saving her. She jolts awake, startled, and sits quietly for a while. Then she grips her shirt tightly. Shin repeats his name, wondering if he is okay. A month passes since the incident. Stardust is sitting at her school desk. Her friend walks up asking if something's bothering her, and she says it's nothing. Clay asks what nothing is supposed to mean and tells her to explain. She starts speaking slowly, then asks, if a villain saved a hero, what would that even mean? Clay asks what kind of crazy talk that is, and Shin repeats the question again, but then tells her to forget it, saying she've just been a little too absorbed in the romance novel she've reading. Clay says she've also got a romance she've been loving lately, shows it to Shin, asking what she thinks. The novel is called The Forbidden Love of the Plane. Egostic and hero Stardust both on the cover. Shin slams her head straight onto the desk, then wonders if he's even alright, if he's not dead somewhere. She looks out the window, saying he must be alive. After all, he's a guy full of tricks. Shin stays there, staring out the window, wondering when the next attack will be. Cut to Lee slicing an apple while Kim announces there won't be any attacks for a while. SEO jumps up, asking if he's serious. Kim confirms he's going to rest a bit. She shouts that she'd told him to stop for good, and he answers that he's not planning another attack. because someone else is going to do it for him. SEO looks confused, asking, "Someone's going to do it for you?" He tells himself he can't stay on the front lines forever. Seeing how easily Stardust blocked Behemoth, he needs a powerful ally for the next challenge. He states that he'll prepare a new challenge for her. Cut to a cafe worker wishing someone good morning. A boy shows up with flowers, confessing his feelings to her. Ego is watching, laughing, thinking there was a scene just like this in the original story. The girl shouts at him to get lost, saying she's stressed as hell. He runs off crying. That's Choi, 23 years old. Ego studies her while sipping his coffee. She looks a little lost. In the original story, in the future, she operates under the codename Electra, a Class A villain. But right now, of course, she lives the life of an ordinary, kind person, constantly fighting an internal destructive impulse. In short, she's a ticking time bomb. Choi walks out, wondering how much longer she'll live this endless cycle of work and more work. She turns, asking if there's anyone around, then starts releasing energy from her hands. She marvels at the bolts sparking from her palm, then starts stretching them out in a straight line, transfers the energy from one hand to the other. She laughs, saying it's beautiful. Suddenly, she notices Ego standing right in front of her. He extends his hand, saying he've been looking for a talent like her for a long time, and asks if she'd like to join an attack. Choi calls him crazy, asking if he thinks every superhuman is automatically a villain like him. Ego tells her to attack him so they can see just how strong she really is. She doesn't hesitate and strikes him, generates a massive orb of energy. Ego starts summoning Behemoth, which suddenly absorbs her energy blast. Ego laughs, asking if that's all she's got. She laughs right back, thrilled. Then Ego says his offer stands for 1 week and tells her to think it over carefully. Choi tells him to wait, but he teleports away, leaving her alone. She looks down at her own hand, then says that felt really good. Cut to Kim, unable to believe what he's hearing. Lee repeats, she thinks the journey with him ends here. Ego shouts, saying after everything he've done for her. SEO cuts in, saying goodbye, then breaks into a wicked laugh while they're all playing a board game. His piece is bankrupt at the height of the championship round. Then Seo orders him to wash 3 days worth of dishes for a family of 5. She points out it's been 3 days since he said he'd recruit a new member and asks if everything's okay. She waits, staring, for his answer. Kim answers that by now, she should have taken the bait he set. Cut to the cafe with Choi serving customers. She's completely burned out, so exhausted she pours coffee upside down without noticing. Her coworker says she looks tired and asks if she'd like to step outside for a break. Choi goes out and sits on the curb. She's anxious, biting her nails. The news is showing Ego as the most influential villain in Korea. Then she notices he've caused 0 casualties and wonders if that's really okay. Choi, the superhuman who generates electricity. Before meeting Ego, she'd never used her powers properly because her parents hated superhumans and strictly controlled her abilities. Like an overloaded battery, unable to release the electricity building up from stress, Choi's destructive instinct had become second nature. Choi remembers the offer Ego gave her. She wipes down the table. 4 days have passed. Later, she serves another customer. 5 days have passed, until she's out of breath, repeating the name Egostic. The next day, she walks the same street looking for him, then turns, excited, saying he took his time, but it's just a cat. Startled by her, it scurries off. Choi looks a little disappointed. Suddenly, Ego appears, asking if she's thought about his offer. She answers quietly that she has, grabs his hand, saying she'll do whatever he tells her to. Choi nervously begs him to break something, quick, then he teleports them both away. Back at Ego's house, Choi stands right in front of the team. Ego introduces her as the newest member, and she says it's a pleasure to meet them. Lee introduces herself politely. Seo pouts, muttering, "Another woman." Then Kim takes off his mask, introduces himself by name. Choi remembers him from the coffee shop, points at him saying he's the handsome guy who came in last week. Ego is completely lost, and Choi turns awkward. Then suddenly, she starts blushing and releasing energy. The whole house loses power. Suddenly, someone shines a light right in their direction, right in Choi's face. It's Yan, asking for a moment. He asks what they're all doing since he still needs to finish his homework, and could they please turn the lights back on. Cut to our heroine's apartment. As always, she's searching for something on her computer. Shin is on Egostic's fan club website. She slams the desk, asking what this even is. She remembers Icicle laughing at her, teasing that she's part of his fan club. Then she flops onto her bed, asks herself if everything's okay, remembers Ego saying she owes him one. Finally, she turns over in bed, whispering his name, Egostic. Cut to the power box. Choi apologizes, saying it's all her fault, and Seo says it's fine. Ego gives her a gentle tap on the shoulder, invites her to come somewhere with him. The moon is already high in the sky. Choi walks down a dirt road. The whole house is dark behind them. Then she stops for a moment. Ego tells her he's ready. There's no one else here but the two of them. Tells her to try whatever she wants to do. freely. Choi stares at him, amazed, then tells him he'd better step back. Ego laughs and starts teleporting away. Right after, she unleashes her full power. Choi laughs, thrilled, releases a giant orb of energy, lighting up the whole area. Ego says just as expected, she's incredibly strong. Kim watches her from a distance. She's kneeling in the crater she'd just created. Ego approaches, offering water and asking if she's satisfied. She drinks from his hand, asking if this attack he keeps talking about actually hurts people, and Ego answers that he's a pacifist. Choi laughs and asks how old he is. Ego starts counting on his fingers. She says they're the same age and asks why he's talking so formally. Choi laughs, telling him he can drop the formalities from now on. He shakes her hand, agreeing, then welcomes her officially to Squad Ego. Choi asks if that name is actually serious. Time passes, and Ego is training her balance early in the morning. She suddenly gains momentum, lands right in front of him. SEO shows up, asking what they're doing so early. Ego answers it's special training. Then he notices something odd. The image of Choi channeling her powers pops into his mind. He explains it's like wrapping her feet in electricity and firing it into the ground. Choi is immediately impressed. The tips Ego gave her had worked. Sometime later, Seo offers her water. She starts hydrating as the heat rises. Suddenly, she asks Ego what he's staring at. He tells her to go take a shower since she reeks. She gets irritated and chucks the bottle at his head, saying of course she smells, she just finished training. Ego turns, asking if she wants to fight right now. She charges her energy, telling him to bring it on. Meanwhile, Seo hears Ego calling for help and tells them to act their age. A month passes, and someone's playing a video game. It's Choi, while Kim and Seo try to teach her the necessary buttons. Then they spot someone approaching. Choi drops the controller as Seo shouts to turn on the desk lamp. They pretend to be planning an attack as Lee walks in. She looks impressed, saying their planning session lasted all night, says they've really been putting in the effort. Ego, Seo, and Choi all freeze up, completely tense. Then Lee gently tells them to stop and go to sleep. Seo and Choi run off, wishing her good night. Ego was about to leave too, but Lee tells him to stay. The two girls peek in, wondering if she's really upset. Then the scene cuts to Stardust's earpiece announcing an attack. She flies at top speed, confirming she's on her way to the location. Suddenly, she arrives, flying in. Choi greets Stardust excitedly. Stardust says nothing since she was expecting Ego. Choi readies an attack while Stardust orders her to surrender. Suddenly, she fires a bolt of lightning at her, asking what she'll do if Choi refuses, then introduces herself as Elektra, here to face her in his place instead. Stardust fixes her hair, staring her down. A week before Elektra's attack, the Pikachu girl questions the protagonist if their training shouldn't have ended the day before. Egostic replies that he abandoned the normal schedule to teach her a special move called the Electric Punch. Although she finds the name strange, the villain fires back, asking if it doesn't sound amazing. Elektra ironizes, suggesting he improve his aesthetic sense for names, which leaves him deeply irritated since, in the original work, it was the girl herself who named the move. Ignoring the provocation, he instructs her to imagine the energy wrapping around her hand instead of just releasing electricity, closing her fist to the limit before firing. She follows the advice and executes the attack, leaving a colossal trail of destruction that scares even herself. Satisfied, the villain orders her to train exhaustively over the next week to deliver this blow against Stardust. Elektra calls him crazy and questions his methods, but striking a dramatic pose, he declares he is just a villain with his own reasons, which the redhead simply ignores. Back in the present, Elektra faces Stardust. Firing several attacks, the redhead provokes the heroine, asking if an A-class could only do that. Stardust deflects all of them masterfully under the watchful eyes of Egostic, who watches the battle from afar as if it were a show. While fighting, Stardust thinks she needs to endure that level of power if she wants to get close to Elektra, surprising herself with her own resistance. Right after, the redhead prepares an even more powerful blow, hitting Stardust head-on. However, before the villain can celebrate, the blonde resurfaces completely unharmed after defending the impact. Scared, Elektra retreats, realizing the heroine is a true monster and wondering how Egostic could play around with someone like that all the time. From afar, the protagonist notices that Stardust is adapting to the attacks, which was exactly why he trained the redhead so much. Compared to the original work, that was nothing. As the scene cuts back to the combat, Stardust demands that the villain surrender so she won't get hurt, making Elektra furious, telling the heroine to go f herself, the Pikachu girl charges forward with everything, and Stardust reacts in kind. The clash of their powers generates an impact wave so violent it surprises the protagonist himself, forcing him to teleport so he won't be hit. Looking through his camera, Egostic sees Stardust standing and Elektra severely injured. The blonde demands to know who the villain mentioned is, and who is behind everything. Elektra scoffs, asking if she really thinks she would get an answer, while Stardust extends her hand, threatening to make her speak the easy way or the hard way. Before the heroine can do anything, Egostic appears, picks the redhead up in his arms, and moves away, greeting Stardust and noting it has been a while since their last meeting. The livestream audience goes wild at the duo's appearance. In shock, Stardust wonders if he is really alive. The villain himself gets confused by her reaction, but confirms he is alive, ironizing that it must be bad news for her. Noticing the heroine's gaze, he asks if she was worried or if she wants updates next time. Elektra complains about the boss's delay, and he apologizes, explaining that he was just watching from afar. Seeing the proximity between the two, Stardust is overcome by jealousy and chooses the path of violence. Scared by the heroine's change in posture, Elektra wonders what got into her, while Egostic comments that nobody knows the fury of a heroine, leaving Stardust timid. Stardust screams, demanding to know what Egostic is doing there, and he calmly replies that he only came to pick up his colleague, fueling the blonde's jealousy even more. The protagonist then opens the live stream to the entire country, officially presenting his alliance of villains. Incredulous, Stardust watches the villain's monologue, in which he claims to possess allies as strong as Elektra who haven't even appeared yet, decreeing the end of his solo attacks. After leaving a warning for South Korea and his dear heroine, he tells Elektra to use Thunderbolt before leaving, which makes her mad, demanding he never say that again. Stardust evades the strike easily and advances, but Egostic teleports away with his ally, mocking that she is still far from catching him. Furious, Stardust punches the wall, bothered by a bad feeling upon imagining the two together like lovebirds, vowing to finish him off in their next encounter. Later in the underground, Egostic confirms his location and opens a passage in the ground with an attack. He moves forward until he finds a gigantic obsidian door, opening it to greet the Vine Witch, a beautiful woman with greenish hair. The protagonist asks for a sealing spell for two objects, a diary recording his days in that world up to that moment, and another to record future events. The witch accepts the request and asks about the spell's duration, to which Egostic replies, "Until the day of my death." With the spell cast, ensuring that no one but the owner can read the journals, he says goodbye. Before the teleportation, the witch warns that he is treading a difficult path. He confirms it is the only possible path and teleports to the top of a building. Admiring the landscape, he remembers that it was there he decided his purpose in the world. As he stretches, anticipating the major events to come, he shouts to the horizon that Stardust should trust him. His line of thought is cut off by his albino ally, Seo-un, who demands that he bring grilled eel for dinner, giving him only 3 seconds. Before leaving, he observes the city, aware that this is the last event of the first phase. Near a supervised highway, the road cracks and a gigantic robotic arm emerges from the ground as an elderly leader of the extremist group declares that this South Korea, which oppressed them, must be destroyed. Meanwhile, at school, Stardust studies while listening to boys in the classroom commenting on the video of Elektra's attack. One of them praises the villain's beauty, while the other suggests that she and Egostic are dating, putting Stardust on alert. They argue about the villain's relationship, reasoning that no one would carry a mere colleague in their arms princess style. One of the youth says he prefers Stardust, leaving her timid, but the other fires back, saying the ego Elektra ship has better chemistry, causing the furious heroine to emanate a murderous aura. The moment is interrupted by the emergency alert on her phone. She runs and contacts headquarters, which confirms it is not a common villain, but a deadly machine trampling the city. Arriving breathless at the scene, she faces the giant robot. The scientist in command questions if the government dog would be capable of stopping the last flame of the Hanun group. Stardust advances, but receives a powerful blow and is thrown far away. She insists on the attack, but something changes inside the robot. Egostic's voice echoes through the loudspeaker. He has taken control of the machine, praising the power of the octopus robot. Elektra comments that the boss looks like a madman acting, and the albino girl says she will get used to it. Egostic assumes the role of the villain and challenges Stardust to stop him from destroying the city, and the heroine smiles, accepting the challenge. With the robot's power adjusted by Seo-un, the protagonist plans to give Stardust a real power-up that day. He attacks the heroine, mocking her skills. In the cabin, he orders the power to be increased and delivers a sequence of blows, but Stardust deflects all of them easily, leaving the villain relieved to know she is strong enough for him to go home in one piece. In a distant institution, the President of the Republic decides to eliminate the giant weapon by authorizing a nuclear missile strike. In battle, Seo-eun puts the robot's speed to the maximum, but Stardust continues to evade with a mocking smile, eventually breaking one of its arms. Agostic decides to use his arcade joystick skill and advances, but the heroine defends easily, feeling stronger and more adapted to the machine's movements, though the robot hits her when she lowers her guard out of arrogance. Stardust destroys one of the robot's legs. Excited, Egostic asks for maximum power, but is met with an awkward silence until Seo-eun finally executes the command. The robot accelerates, but the heroine continues to evade, leaving the livestream audience to wonder if they are witnessing the birth of an S-class heroine. Stardust focuses on bringing the machine down quickly, knowing that civilians are involved and that Egostic's presence there, ironically, makes victory possible. However, HQ orders Stardust's immediate withdrawal, informing her about the nuclear missile authorized by the president. Outraged by the danger imposed on civilians, she notices that the robot has stopped fighting and is waiting for her, which means Egostic doesn't know about the missile. Apologizing, she rips off her communicator and flies into the sky to intercept the warhead. While the president and his central staff watch everything while eating popcorn, Egostic wonders if she fled, unaware that Stardust decided to save him, refusing to let the villain die at the hands of the state. Remembering the past, Stardust decides to repay the favor she owes Egostic. She intercepts the missile directly, locked in a brutal battle of resistance under the tense gaze of the population. Meanwhile, inside the robot, Egostic tells Seo-eun to track what is happening, and the hacker begins a countdown while locating the order from the presidential cabinet. At second 0, Stardust manages to deflect the missile into space, generating a colossal explosion visible all over Seoul. The heroine enters freefall, unconscious, but before she hits the ground, Egostic catches her in his arms. He wonders why she risked her life for him and how someone so powerful can be so soft. Seeing the blonde's serene expression, he decides to stay in character as the villain, though internally he recognizes that the missile would have killed him and his companions. Upon waking up briefly, Stardust says the debt is paid and falls asleep in his arms, leaving Egostic to wonder if she has begun to notice that he isn't a real villain. After securing Stardust's safety, Egostic receives confirmation from his allies about the president's betrayal. Losing faith in humanity because the government tried to wipe out the heroine along with the target, he orders Seo-eun to turn on the livestream immediately. Before the country, the villain displays the unconscious Stardust, making it clear that the blame for the situation is not his, but the presidential cabinet's, which abandoned its citizens and caused chaos to eliminate a single enemy. The scandal explodes in the newspapers, and the resulting political crisis brings massive impeachment requests against the president. The media also speculates about Stardust's promotion to S-class alongside Egostic himself. Watching the television, the heroine Icicle turns off the set when interrupted by her secretary, who brings great news for the company. Left alone, Icicle mentally thanks Egostic for the opportunity. At Egostic's base, the protagonist reveals that Stardust is suspicious of him and may no longer see him as a villain. Elektra calls him an idiot, and all the girls start laughing at his face. He tries to defend himself by listing his misdeeds, but no one takes him seriously. Elektra questions if he spent all this time trying to look evil, pointing out that the motives for his actions have always been all too obvious. After all, why else would she herself accept his recruitment? Seo-eun agrees that he doesn't have a villain's posture, and though Egostic argues that Stardust, as the personification of justice, should hate him, Elektra fires back that he underestimated the heroine's intelligence. The protagonist panics, realizing that if Stardust discovers the truth, she will hold back in fights and fail to achieve the evolution needed to prevent the destruction of the world. Determined to remind her that he is the bad guy, he sets their next destination, Busan. The scene cuts to Stardust in Busan, being led by a butler through a luxury building. Her friend Icicle, Seola, sneaks up from behind with a hug, praising her beauty and celebrating the birth of South Korea's first S-class. On the rooftop, while savoring mango treats, Seola confesses she is envious of Stardust for having a fixed villain like Egostic to make her grow, since there are only minor crimes in Busan. Stardust deflects with excuses, but noticing by the clock that someone has breached her office security, Seola excuses herself. Upon arriving at her desk, she is surprised by Egostic, who reveals that he deactivated the system just to find her. Seola asks if he came to surrender, but he laughs, stating he is there because he became interested in her as the true ruler of the Yusung group, who pretends to be a heroine but wants to swallow South Korea whole. Seola ironizes, saying she thought he came to stop pampering Stardust. Impressed by the insight of the backstage villain, the protagonist proposes a strategic alliance, thinking of hitching a ride on her ambition. While in another part of the building, Stardust feels a shiver, foreboding something bad. Agostic assumes a sarcastic tone about Seola's righteous heroine facade and offers his help. She tries to dismiss the accusations, but the villain leaves a pen drive with highly valuable information on the desk as proof of sincerity and teleports away, promising to return in a week. Seolha breathes a sigh of relief, impressed by the villain's power of information and capital, and concludes that he acts more like an anti-hero. Analyzing the data, she realizes she holds the power to put Korea at her feet in a year. A week later, Agostic returns, and Seola accepts the alliance. The villain starts treating her with informality, which she finds strange but accepts, presenting a contract that demands weekly meetings. After a brief negotiation of logistics, they close the deal for bi-weekly meetings. Seola questions his obsession with Stardust, asking if all his attacks are just to make her grow, and faced with his silence, she asks to be attacked too to increase her own popularity. Agostic gives her a flick, calling her crazy, but reflects that since he eliminated the Black Disaster threat, he will need to find a way to ensure Icicle's power-up. He agrees to the attack in exchange for a favor. She must speak ill of him periodically to Stardust to keep his image as a villain intact. Seola accepts, thinking he is a pervert, but recognizes that he is a difficult strategist to deal with. Seola visits Stardust in her apartment in Seoul, claiming she missed her and downplaying the situation in Busan. While the blue-haired girl sniffs the sheets as a precaution, leaving Stardust embarrassed, they sit down to drink. A bit drunk, Seola begins to speak ill of Agostic excessively. Stardust suspects the lack of sincerity in those criticisms, keeping to herself the opinion that the villain wasn't that bad after all. After putting her friend to bed, Stardust looks at her phone, waiting for the next attack. At the villain's base, Seo-eun appears dead tired after spending the night working on a secret project. Agostic announces that the next target will be Busan, leaving his allies confused, and explains that a partner company requested the attack. Elektra ironizes the fact that a company would outsource terrorism. A week later, a huge airship appears in the skies of Busan. Agostic announces his arrival and challenges Icicle, firing bombs that are blocked by a colossal ice wall created by the heroine, who enters the theater calling him insolent. In Seoul, Stardust discovers the attack and flies to the scene immediately. In a flashback on the Lapis Guild airship, 3 minor villains were celebrating the attack when Agostic appeared and claimed the ship. After being beaten up, they agreed to ally with Ego Stream, intimidated by the villain's electric power. Agostic organizes the duties and sends Elektra to rest in the cabin. Returning to the present, Agostic opens the live feed to present his new allies, and Icicle demands his surrender. The villain fires bombs that she freezes in the air, using the ice blocks as a platform to advance, while Stardust flies toward Busan at maximum speed, ignoring return orders. On the airship, the allies try to attack Stardust but are frozen by her. Agostic appears above the heroine, firing firearms, but she defends and counterattacks, focusing on sinking the airship. The protagonist announces the end of the broadcast and flees with Icicle, ordering her to unfreeze the minor allies. But looking up at the sky, Agostic and Seolha are surprised by Stardust's sudden arrival. Icicle tries to keep her calm as Stardust lands and questions what the two were talking about. Seolha lies, saying the villain was provoking her, but Stardust notices that both were smiling. Icicle disguises it, leaving room for mutual mockery. When Stardust makes a move to go after Agostic, Seola holds her by the arm, warning that the villain threatened to bomb all of Busan if followed. Stardust gives in and decides to return to Seoul. During the flight back, the blonde reflects that Agostic is her villain, consolidating a subtle shift in the dynamic between them. Meanwhile, at the base, the girls discuss the media's romance rumors, irritating Elektra, but Agostic ignores the chatter and invites Seo-eun to an elite auction in the underground. At the auction filled with corrupt big shots, Agostic buys an ancient ring carrying a tragic fate for $150,000. At home, Seo-eun questions the deficit in the bank account, and the villain activates the item, releasing a mist from which an imposing spirit emerges. The creature introduces himself as the Knight Saint Pedeth, but Agostic interrupts him and decrees that his new name will be Death Knight because it sounds cooler. The next day, the protagonist releases the spirit so he can feel the sunlight, but faced with the creature's complaints about the name, Agostic locks him back in the ring as training. The knight yields, begging not to return to the dark and accepting the villain as master. Agostic promises him an opponent of equal stature to test his patched-up skills. Stardust. Elektra doubts the ghost can withstand the heroine's strength, but to prove his worth, the Death Knight summons an axe and destroys part of the surrounding forest, priding himself on his S-class level. Elektra freaks out at the new destruction of the trees she had the trouble of replanting, and the protagonist points to his subordinate, who ends up grounded. At the Heroes Association, Stardust monitors the internet regarding the rumors involving Igostic and Icicle, fearing he might focus his attacks only on Busan. Suddenly, a terrorism alert sounds in downtown Seoul. She leaves immediately and finds the Death Knight in an abandoned apartment complex. While Igostic watches everything from home eating popcorn, the Knight introduces himself as a member of Ego Stream, but Stardust ignores the introductions and demands to know where Igostic is. The monster attacks, impressed by the heroine's strength and commenting that it has been centuries since he faced someone like that. Irritated that Igostic sent a subordinate instead of coming personally with his airship like he did in Busan, Stardust activates her awakening mode. A flashback reveals that Igostic had ordered the Death Knight to limit his strength and pretend to lose after some time of fighting. Despite his wounded pride as a nobleman, the creature obeys upon seeing the command of the ring. In the present, faced with Stardust's full power, the Death Knight simulates his defeat and flees, promising not to lower his guard next time and fulfilling the Master's plan. At night, Igostic uploads the video of the fight and gets furious with the haters' comments on the internet, promising to ban them at the next opportunity. He finds Stardust's level of fury in the combat strange, and Icicle calls him, criticizing him for not going personally while reminding him of their meeting the next day. Meanwhile, in her room, Stardust can only think of the villain. The next morning, Igostic delivers the last pen drive of information to Icicle. Impressed by the ease with which he gets data that even the largest companies in Korea don't possess, she asks his secret, and the villain jokes, "If I tell you, I'll have to kill you." Seola asks to visit his house and know his real name, but he refuses. She questions if he doesn't trust her, but faced with his silence, she decides to let it go and asks about his future plans. Igostic reveals that he intends to just rest that year because something big is going to happen, and before teleporting away, he shares his real name, Dain. Surprised, Seola calls Stardust. They meet, and Stardust apologizes for her coldness in Busan, which Seola accepts promptly. Later, while the blonde sleeps, Seola reflects on Dain's expression and what awaits the coming year. The scene cuts to a cathedral where the leader of the Moonlight cult preaches to his followers, announcing the world's purification through the arrival of the moon god and yin energy, brought by his priestess. At Igostic's base, the group has breakfast on a freezing day. The protagonist proudly observes his team's potential. Seo Yoon, an S-class superintelligence, Lee Ha-yul, the only healer in Korea and an S-class, Choi Se-hee, Elektra, an A-class in evolution, and the Death Knight. Ha-yul leaves to study for the medical school entrance exam, and though Igostic questions her choice since she already has healing powers, he is quickly silenced by a spoonful of food shoved into his mouth by the young girl. Elektra and Seo Yoon leave to work in the basement. At night, Igostic takes his allies to the top of a building and hands out special glasses to detect the magic circles scattered by the Moonlight cult. These circles have the power to weaken abilities and erase memories, the real reason for Seoul's destruction and Stardust's suffering in the original work. They begin a hunt to deactivate the markings, and to neutralize the magic, Igostic brings the Vine Witch, who channels a greenish energy into the protagonist's chest, ensuring he stays immune and free inside the enemy's magic circle. Satisfied, he dismisses his allies to rest, but before leaving, the Vine Witch surprises him with a kiss, wishing him luck on his journey to save the world. An A-class villain emerges in the city threatening civilians, but is obliterated by Stardust with a single blow. Igostic watches the scene, disappointed with how fast the fight was, and fearing that such ease might leave the heroine rusty. Seo Yoon interrupts him, warning that the heroine's destructive level requires upgrades to the group's armor, and proudly displays her fan club page as the hacker of Ego Stream. Focused on his plan, Dane writes an anonymous letter to the president of the Heroes Association, warning that a large-scale terrorist attack will strike downtown Seoul as soon as the first snow falls, demanding an immediate evacuation. Time passes, and the group celebrates Ha-yul's acceptance into medical school. Icicle calls the villain, letting him know she is in Seoul and inviting him to eat due to the blizzard. And at that exact moment, a mysterious girl emerges amidst the storm.